Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to what is the first Development Standards Committee meeting of 2025. And a special welcome to members of the public who are attending here in the chamber and also online today. This meeting is being recorded, but it is also being broadcast live on the Angus Council YouTube channel. Can I remind all those joining us remotely to turn their microphones to mute unless they wish to speak, and they should do so by raising their hands remotely. Can I also remind members that under Standing Order 13, remote members attending hybrid meetings where quasi-judicial and regulatory matters have been considered will not be permitted to participate by audio only, and must have their video and camera functions switched on at all times. Okay, Laura, apologies today.
Thank you, Convener. Apologies from Councillor Tommy Stewart.
That's fine, thank you. And do any members have any declarations of interest? Councillor Durno.
Just a statement of transparency. One of the applicants, Mr. Peter Sterling, I spoke to him recently about a fallen tree, but I did not discuss any other applications. And Mr. Whitten, who's going to speak today, I had an email from him a few months back, but obviously I didn't to say what my opinion on the email was. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Durno. Is there any other conflicts? Nope. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. Agenda item 3 is to consider building warrants, and this committee is asked to note that during the period 7th of December 2024 to the 31st of January 2025, a total of 68 building warrants, 4 demolition warrants and 33 amendment to warrants have been approved, with an estimated cost of £14,660,064, and a copy of the approved warrants has been sent to every member. Is that noted? Thank you. And agenda item 4 on delegated decisions. Again, this committee is asked to note during the same period, 7th December 24 to 31st January 25, a further 68 applications have been approved and 2 refused under the Planning Acts through the scheme of delegation to officers. Again, a copy is being sent to every member. Again, is that noted? Thank you. Agenda item 5 is the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 17th December. Are there any comments on these or any amendments considered necessary? If not, are the minutes approved? Thank you. Okay, we have 3 planning applications to consider today, and there's also a planning application notice and also the results of one of the applications going to the Scottish Ministers and the reporter. We'll deal with that later on. So agenda item 6 relates to report 41/25. This report deals with planning application number 24/00589/full, submitted on behalf of Peter J. Stirling Limited for a proposed new solar farm installation, including battery storage facility on land 200 metres west of Denfield, Arbroath. So we'll start with Mr. Taylor. If you could present the slides, please, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, members. Item 6 is a local level planning application. It relates to the formation of a new solar farm and battery energy storage facility on land at Denfield, Arbroath. The application site is shown in the approximate position of the red dashed polygon in this area here. It currently comprises cultivated agricultural land. The thick black line you can see on the right-hand side and extending to the north of the site is the development boundary for Woodville. So you can see the relationship of the site to the development boundary of Woodville. The land lies out with that development boundary. So the site itself measures around about 32 hectares in area. 20 hectares of that area would be accommodated by solar panels and around 2,000 square metres by battery storage. Remaining areas within the site would allow for standoffs between the closest parts of development and the closest residential receptors, and allows for the formation of landscaping. So members will be aware that both the Local Development Plan and MPF4 provides a supportive policy framework for renewable energy proposals. and that includes proposals which relate to development on prime quality agricultural land, which is the case in this application. This is prime quality agricultural land. Information available to officers indicates that in terms of the prime quality land available in Angus, renewable energy, battery storage type developments have been developed on less than 2% of the overall amount of available prime quality land within Angus at the time of presentation. It's also worth pointing out at this stage that MPF4 policy recognises that this type of development can and often will give rise to significant landscape and visual impacts. It indicates that where those impacts are localised and/or appropriate design mitigation has been applied, they will generally be considered to be acceptable. So this is a plan which shows the layout of the site. We have Denfield Road, which runs along the east side of the site. We have property at Woodville Fuse to the north, around about 175 metres from the northern site boundary. We have scattered properties on the east side of Denfield Road, a collection of 4 in this area and another 2 here. And then we have properties down towards the south of the site, approximately around the position of the proposed access and again further to the south. The site is contained on its west side by the Hercules Burn, and there is a core path which runs along the southern site boundary and the approximate position of my cursor, which runs between Bankhead and the approximate position of the site access. And I'll show you a bit more detail as we go through the slides. As is typical of this type of development, solar panels will be laid out on an east-west axis. They would have a maximum height of 2.25 metres above ground level. It's also worth pointing out at this stage that this is a revised proposal. There was a withdrawn application which proposed solar panels further to the south and didn't extend as far north as the development we see today. That application was withdrawn as a consequence of feedback from officers and as a consequence of the level of public comment received. The applicant has gone away. It's understood they've carried out some public consultation, and the application we have before us today is a revised scheme to try and take account of the feedback provided by both members of the public and by officers of the planning service. Generally speaking, the distance between residential property and the development would be around about a minimum of 100 metres, so there is a standoff been introduced from the closest houses to solar panels. Now, this is a site which doesn't have significant landscape features at present. It doesn't have much by way of tree and hedge planting, but in this case, the applicant has indicated that they have secured a grid connection for June 2032. So that leaves us a fairly significant period of time to ensure advanced planting could come forward. So that would enable us to secure some of the landscape mitigation, which the development relies upon in advance of both the battery storage and the solar panel aspects being delivered on the site. Planning conditions are proposed in the report to ensure advanced planting would take place before the end of 2026. That gives it a reasonably significant period of time to start to mature and start to filter and mitigate the most significant impacts of development. This photograph is taken adjacent to the proposed site access, so you can see there is an existing field access located to the south of the site. The solar panels and the battery storage system would extend in the area between Denfield Road on the east side of the site, and you can maybe see some trees associated with the Hercules Burn on the west side of the site. To the south of the site, we have a core path. Again, conditions are proposed to ensure the maintenance of public access rights along the core path during the construction process. And in terms of impacts associated with vehicle movements, the road service is satisfied that traffic associated with the development can be accommodated, and they request a construction traffic management plan which allows us to manage the level of traffic at any particular time, the timing of that traffic and the route construction traffic would take. You may see on the right hand side the site is within a speed restricted area, so the access itself would be located within an area which is subject to a 30-mile-an-hour speed restriction. This is a drone image taken from a very similar location, and the site access is just slightly out of shot, hidden by the tree canopy. But we have Denfield Road on the east side of the site, we have the Hercules Burn on the west side of the site, and the core path in the foreground here. In the bottom part of the field, the battery energy storage part of the development will be delivered, and in the area extending to the north would be the solar panels themselves, with a standoff introduced between Denfield Road and the closest part where panels would be. That gives us an opportunity to secure some planting, some landscape mitigation along the roadside boundary and along the fence boundary on the east side of the application site, and to the south side of the site to provide some screening between users of the core path and the battery energy storage aspect of the proposal. So touching firstly on the battery energy storage aspect, that will be located close to the site access, around about 57 metres to the north of the core path and around about 100 metres from the closest house, which is Catherine Bank, located just in the position of my cursor. On the top left, we have the layout of the battery storage system. So there would be what members would typically expect, a number of sort of shipping container type structures, which contain battery storage containers, welfare facilities, substation sort of facilities. That compound would be sort of contained by a 3.5 metre high acoustic fence, which would provide some screening of the development and would also obviously deal with noise emissions from that aspect of the proposal. In that regard, the applicant has submitted a noise impact assessment that considers both noise associated with the development and the cumulative picture associated with other developments. That assessment has been considered by the Council's Environmental Health Service, who has no objection to the proposal subject to conditions. Also, as members would typically expect for this type of development, conditions are proposed which require a fire and safety management plan. We would expect the applicant to set out measures to deal with the interception of any contaminated water in the event of an emergency situation. And as I've already noted, because of the grid connection timeframe, there is an opportunity for us to deliver advanced planting in this area. So while there isn't much of an existing landscape framework in that part of the site, there is an opportunity for us to secure that before the batteries or the solar panels would appear within the field. This slide is taken just to the north of Arbroath. It is the Persimmon development, which is located close to the northern site boundary of the development boundary of Arbroath. It shows a relationship between an operational battery storage facility and housing, and that separation distance is around about 35 to 50 metres. And what we're talking about in the application before us today is a separation distance of close to 100 metres. So that is an impact which has previously been deemed to be acceptable, and the separation we're talking about is significantly greater than has been found acceptable elsewhere in the local area. Moving on to the solar panels themselves, this slide is intended to give an impression of the visibility of the development. So it's a zone of theoretical visibility, and it's based on a bare earth analysis. So it doesn't take account of buildings, and it doesn't take account of established trees and planting in the surrounding area. So it's very much a worst case scenario. The ZTV information suggests that visibility of the development is largely restricted to areas within 1 kilometre of the site. That the plan does show visibility beyond that, but I think in reality, given the position of landscaping, buildings, there's unlikely to be visibility to any significant extent beyond 1 kilometre. Now, this is a development which should have a significant impact on the landscape character of the site. It would change from cultivated agricultural land. It would become land which is occupied by man-made structures. It would have a different surface finish, and it would have an industrialising impact on the character of that field. However, the impact on the character of the landscape within the site is, while that's significant, it is localised, which is an impact NPF4 considers to be generally acceptable, and the impact on landscape character in the wider area wouldn't be significant. It wouldn't have a significant impact on the landscape character type of dip sub farmland in the round, which covers large areas. So the application has attracted objections, 20 objections, and the points of objection are summarised in the report, and material planning considerations are addressed in the assessment. The blue dots you see on the slide are the location of the closest households providing comments. So we have comments from property at Woodville Fuse to the north. We have comments from the property adjacent to the site at Denfield, who would have fairly open views, both sets of houses, fairly open views into and across the site. And we have objections from parties close to the site access and down to Denfield steadings at the south. And I understand there are speakers here today from the different areas surrounding the site, both to the north, east and south. Conditions are proposed in the report to address impacts raised and objections where appropriate. Conditions are proposed to secure advanced planting, to control noise impacts, to control traffic arrangements, to ensure drainage from the site is no different to existing rates, greenfield runoff rates, and to secure appropriate site restoration at the operational end of the operational life of development, which is anticipated to be 25-26 years. So I've tried to give you a bit more information about the impacts from those three collections of properties to the south, southeast, to the east and to the north. Starting to the south east of the site, close to the proposed site access, we have the battery storage and solar panels in that area. We have property at Catherine Bank, which is directly opposite the site access, and that is shown in the bottom left-hand side. From that property, the development will be visible from both windows, from garden grounds and on approaches to that property, and similarly from property around Denfield Steadings. This will be an obvious feature in the landscape. But it's considered, having regard to the proposed landscape mitigation, having regard to the separation distance that would be provided, and having regard to decisions made elsewhere in Angus, that impact, while it is significant, it is not considered to be unacceptable. This is a photomontage provided by the applicant in proximity to the site access. It doesn't really show the battery storage aspect of the proposal, which will be on the left-hand side. It shows the solar panels would extend and cover much of the agricultural land on the west side of Denfield Road. It also doesn't show the advanced planting, but it does show that there will be an industrialising effect on that field. It will be an adverse effect on landscape character, but again, subject to landscape mitigation, having regard to decisions taken elsewhere, that impact is not considered to be unacceptable. Moving on to property to the east of the site on Denfield Road, we can see a couple of those properties located in the photographs on the right-hand side. We have Linden Lee, which has open and obvious views across Denfield Road into the site. And again, the property below that is the property in this area, open aspect over the site at present. From those properties, there will be a significant impact. Though the solar development will occupy a significant extent of the horizontal field of view, but having regard to the separation distance, the proposed advanced planting, and decisions taken elsewhere, that impact is not considered to be unacceptable. It would be a significant impact, but not an unacceptable impact. There's two photomontages provided from the approximate position of that property. One which looks sort of southwest down Denfield Road. On the left-hand side, we see panels that would be occupying a significant extent of the horizontal field of view, but you can see in the foreground there will be a standoff between the houses and the closest panels, and again that visualisation does not take account of the planting mitigation which will be provided. Turning to the west-northwest, again this shows the panels would occupy a significant extent of the horizontal field of view. From this location you can see there's a rising land to the west which provides a landscape backcloth. Again, doesn't take account of the landscape mitigation. Impacts from here, significant, but not considered by officers at least to be unacceptable. Moving to property at Woodville Fuse to the north, the separation distance increases in this area between 175 extended up to around about 250 metres. Property in Woodville Fuse is generally elevated above the level of the site, so there continue to be views over the top of the panels extending to the south. Again, having regard to the separation distance, while the impacts on these properties will be significant, having regard to other decisions, the landscape mitigation and the distance involved, impacts are not considered to be unacceptable. Photographs on the right-hand side just give an impression of how open the sort of southerly aspect of those property is over the application site to the south. And this is a photomontage taken from that position. So again, in the foreground, it illustrates there would be a reasonable standoff before the panels appear. And again, with landscape mitigation, it's hoped that that impact would reduce. And you can see there is views over the top of the development and into the rising landform further to the south and southwest. This image is taken from the core path. There will be an impact on users of the core path, which runs along the south side of the site. So as users move from east to west or west to east, the impact will change. Where the path is closest to the development, there will be advanced planting to help mitigate effects. But again, while it is a significant impact, it's not considered to be an unacceptable impact. So in summary, members are aware there is strong policy support in NPF4 for renewable energy developments, and that policy support recognises that this is a type of development that will have significant impacts. It indicates where the impacts are localised, and can be appropriately mitigated, they will generally be considered to be acceptable. This is a proposal which has no objections from technical consultees, and while there are public concerns, it's considered that the most significant impacts can be addressed through landscape mitigation and conditions to deal with matters such as noise impacts, traffic movements. Impacts with this development are considered to be similar to those found elsewhere in Angus on approved or operational sites. They're not considered to be unacceptable. The application is considered to accord with the development plan. There are no material considerations in the opinion of officers which would justify refusal of planning permission, and on that basis the application is recommended for approval.
Right, thank you, Mr Taylor. We'll start off with members' questions for the Council Officer. Councillor Melville first.
Thank you, Convener. This question is a bit wider than this, excuse me, than this specific application, but it's about a cumulative impact, which is mentioned a few times in the report, and it's talking about development within a 5 kilometre radius of the site. Are we limited to that 5 kilometres, or on a case-by-case basis can we go beyond that? And it also seems to be solely limited to visual impacts rather than some of the other impacts which might arise. I remember, Convener, previously that there was talk of a wider piece of work ongoing in terms of guidance, local guidance on cumulative impact, but I certainly haven't seen that. So I just wonder if we could maybe, after this meeting, get an update on that work. But in the meantime, are we looking at things other than visual impact on a community or an area from a lot of development?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So cumulative impacts are both landscape and visual impacts. So I think there's quite a useful representation that deals with this. It's not just cumulative impacts, visually at least, from a static position. It's a sequential impact as you travel through the landscape. So obviously, if you're on a particular commuter route, a well-used recreational route, and as you pass different developments, we have to assess all of that in the round. So it's not specifically limited to a specific area. In terms of cumulative landscape impact, we often consider it in terms of cumulative impacts on landscape character. So, for example, this site is located in the dip slope farmland landscape character type, and there's sub-areas within that, and our guidance talks about capacity within that area being fairly open to allow solar development to become a significant and defining feature of the landscape. So our capacity assessment talks about a wider area, much beyond 5 kilometres, talking about the actual wider landscape character type itself. So there isn't a specific set distance. It's like everything, it's a judgment. And the slide I'm showing now just tries to give a better impression in terms of the closest development. So we have, I think, at the top here on the 5 kilometre edge, we have sort of Kinblethment, we have Park Hill, located adjacent to the railway line in this area, closer to 5 kilometres. And again, we have a proposal which isn't an application yet to the west of our Burlet. We have an operational development at the Gynde. But in terms of close to the site itself, we have the application site. We have the battery energy storage system, which was recently approved by committee at Lochaber, which is sort of separated from this site by a field. And then we have battery storage, which I showed a photograph of earlier, just to the north of Arbroath. So in terms of impacts on landscape character local to the site, we don't consider this breaches any threshold. And in terms of as we extend further from the site, as you can see, it's a fairly limited impact in terms of the wider area.
Just as a brief follow-up, Convener, I think what I was asking, though, was do we assess beyond visual and landscape character? Because, for instance, if you've got 5 or 6 battery energy storage systems in a fairly close proximity, do we then measure, obviously working with Scottish Fire and Rescue, the potential cumulative impact on fire readiness, for instance, in the area? That's, I think, what I'm trying to get at.
So for each application, we consult Scottish Fire and Rescue so that they have that picture, if you like, so they have the opportunity to raise any cumulative concern they may have. And in terms of other cumulative impacts, sorry, I focused on landscape and visual, I apologise. In terms of cumulative noise, for example, the noise assessment we have takes account of other operational consented developments in the area. So we have considered cumulative impact beyond landscape and visual impact, and that's hopefully covered in the report for members.
Okay, Councillor Beattie, we'll take you first before we go on to hybrid.
Thanks, Convener. Ed, can we go back to the actual plan of the site and have a look at the battery storage photo again, please? That's the one. Oh. Yeah, so I know there's going to be a fire management plan, okay, but the location of the battery storage is quite a bit uphill from the Hercules burn. Will there be a bund to separate the two? Well, because it doesn't actually show that on any of the diagrams.
So the plans don't identify a bund would be provided, but you'll see in the conditions that we ask for arrangements for the management of surface water. So if that arrangement, that scheme would require to have consultation with our council colleagues in the road service, who are sort of the engineers for drainage matters. If that information identified that a bund was required, then obviously there is the opportunity through the condition to secure that. But we haven't specified a bund, and a bund isn't proposed. We have asked for arrangements for surface water drainage that would need to be carried out by a sort of appropriately qualified engineer. And if that identified the need for a bund to be adequate to deal with the issues, then we have the opportunity to secure that.
Councillor Cowdy.
Thank you very much. So my question relates to wildlife habitat and biodiversity. I can see on page 18 at point 8.53 that it's suggested that some biodiversity improvement will be seen as compared to the baseline, which currently exists, which I very much welcome. And I also see specific measures that are suggested, which is always good: wildlife meadows, bird and bat boxes, etc. And I also note that the presence of otters in Hercules Den, of which I'm already aware, and that's incredible. I guess what my question applies to this and other applications: how do you actually measure that quantitatively in the future? So do you, as officers, request an ecological survey be done at a particular point in the future? And if not, could we, I guess, because I often see things like meadows and corridors and bird and bat boxes being suggested. That's quite fluffy stuff, really. And if we could have a quantitative analysis of the benefits in the future to wildlife and the habitat, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for the question. My understanding is MPF4 requires biodiversity enhancement for development proposals, but as members are aware, MPF4 is a relatively new document, and I think as implementation of that document evolves, the Scottish Government is working on, I believe, a biodiversity metric which allows us to sort of objectively quantify what the biodiversity net gain would be. In terms of the process we currently have in place in advance of that guidance being formally published and adopted, for this type of application, we would ask an applicant to carry out an ecological appraisal. The situation with this site is obviously it's largely cultivated agricultural land, and the landscape mitigation proposed is likely to provide a significant biodiversity net gain. There are measures within the ecological information to ensure that there's a standoff, for example, between the site and the burn, recognising that that is a habitat feature. But in terms of trying to specifically answer your question, at the moment there is no, as far as I'm aware, identified metric. I think there is in England, but not yet in Scotland. But I understand the Scottish Government is working on that, and that is expected, as I understand it, at least in the near future.
Can I just come with a follow-up request,
Yeah,
Chair?
ahead.
Sorry, thank
Go
you. When that is available, could you let us as elected members know that's sort of up and running, as it were? Because I'd be very keen to see that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Cowdy. Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, convener, and thanks for the presentation. You did touch on the fact that this is prime agricultural land, and you said that currently about 2% of the prime arable land in Angus is already used for battery storage, etc. I note at 7.2 on page 8, when we're looking at the summary of objections, the top one there is the loss of prime agricultural land. Good, and this is as much for the benefit and information of members of the public who may be watching this public meeting. Could you please state whether there is any limit on the amount of prime agricultural land that can be taken up by solar farms in Angus, and also whether that can be used as a reason for refusing an application.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. I suppose the simple and short answer is there is no limit defined in national or local policy on the quantity of prime quality agricultural land that can be used by renewable energy development. The policy approach in the local development plan and the national planning framework is to protect the development of prime quality land subject to certain exceptions, and those exceptions include renewable energy development. Now, I am aware that Scottish ministers have called in an application in the Perth and Kinross area where there is a potential concern about the loss of agricultural land. That has been, as I understand it, with Scottish ministers for a reasonable period of time now, and we are awaiting with interest the outcome of that call-in to see if that results in any sort of change or concern. But as it stands, that decision isn't available. That matter was considered in a recent appeal decision, and the reporter suggested that that shouldn't be a reason to delay any future decision making. In fact, I think that the last item on the agenda today is that appeal decision and makes specific reference to that issue. So, answering your question, there is no limit, but we are watching closely what happens with the called-in applications.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Brace. Any other questions from members? Oh, I'm not seeing. Councillor Dorn.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask the question openly. And I know that there's some detail in the papers just about the risk of, following on from Councillor Cowdy's question there, about any potential risk and mitigations around how the construction, how the battery storage and any kind of runoff in the incident of fire management as well might affect the waterways, and what mitigations are in place on the site or in the conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. I draw your attention to conditions 3C, which requires a construction environmental management plan, which, amongst other things, would seek for information to show how, during the construction process, potential environmental risks would be mitigated, and other conditions beyond that. Sorry, I'm just panning through the report to tell you the number of those. There's also a condition requiring, I think, a fire safety management plan, which also requires the applicant to set out measures to minimise the potential for any untreated water from the battery containers or batteries arising because of an emergency situation, measures to prevent any contamination leaving the site. So we propose conditions to deal with both potential impacts on the environment during construction and during the operation of the development.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dorn. Any other questions in the room at all? No? Okay, thanks, Mr Taylor, for answering these. We have a number of speakers this morning. For their benefit, Understanding Order 12 of Angus Council, applicants, supporters and objectors are given the opportunity to address any points which they wish this committee to take into account in coming to its decision. Understanding Order 12.3, I've decided that speakers will be given 5 minutes each only. Members of this committee have already been provided with the opportunity to read all submissions that have been sent in by members of the public already, so are familiar with most of the points that will be raised by speakers. We'll start with Mr. Marcus Hicks. Is Mr. Hicks here? So if you come down to the seat here, Mr. Hicks, and when you're ready to speak, if you just put your mic on. And if you are speaking, any goes off, you'll have to put it back on again, okay? I will let you know when about 4 minutes, you've got a minute to wrap up after that, okay? And at the end of it, if you you'll have to be open to speak to questions from the floor from our members here, if that's applicable, okay? So off you go, if you've got 5 minutes.
First, thanks for allowing me to address the committee today. I'm Marcus, a resident of Woodville. I'm a concerned resident from Woodville, just along from the solar farm, and here today to ask councillors to seriously consider not allowing this development. I'm not one who complains just to complain. It has taken me some thought and time to decide whether to come and speak to you guys. I'm pretty nervous about it. My concerns are as follows: loss of prime agricultural land, devaluation of my property and other properties in the surrounding area, impending construction work. It will not be connected to the grid until 2032, and the effect on wildlife. I'll start with the loss of agricultural land. Why is this being allowed? If the site was a low-quality farmland, not classed as agricultural, then there may be an argument for the development. The UK government emphasises the importance of farming and food security. We need more, not less. I have grave and realistic concerns that not only my property, but all properties in the area will lose value. This will hit my pocket and others. Who compensates us for this? The noise pollution from significant construction project will be disruptive to the area for residents and wildlife. Has anyone looked into the effect on residents, not to mention spoiling the beauty of the countryside? The development will have a negative effect on all local mental health through causal losses and the stress of living next to an industrial building site. Has this been taken into account? The infrastructure and roads are not the best in the area as it stands, but with construction traffic, this will further damage the roads. Who's going to pay for this? Oh, it's just moved. I fully understand that we need renewable energy from a sustainable source, which, may I add, this will not provide for 7 years. But there seems to be a growing number of applications in Angus for solar farms. Are we not going a bit too far? We now have another battery storage plan to go in, I don't know, approximately a couple of kilometres from this site. That will put 3 battery storage facilities within close proximity, within the 5 kilometres or closer. The government's Clean Power 2030 action plan. It pledges to drive the construction of solar canopies on outdoor car parking spaces. This is because the government has realised the mistake they have made by allowing much needed farmland to be destroyed. I'm hoping before it's too late that you realise the mistake you could be making by approving this application. By the time it's approved, it'll be too late to change. I'm struggling to see the benefits of the development other than financial benefits for the landowner. I'm not here sitting here being a NIMBY. I'm pleading with you that this doesn't get planning. Will you act as local councillors who are to protect the area of Angus and represent the community? Please stand up and be accounted. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Hicks. Have members any questions for Mr. Hicks? Nope, you got off lightly, Mr. Hicks. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Now, have you got the photographs, Mr. Whitton? Okay, the next one on the list, Mr. Glenn Whitton. I know, Mr. Whitton, you've got a couple of photographs. We've got them here, and we'll put them up on the screen when you want to refer to them. Okay. So again, Mr. Whitton, you've got 5 minutes, and again, I'll give you once you reach 4, I'll give you a note of a minute to wrap up. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'm here today to talk about the noise impact assessment, how it was actually carried out in its relationship to BS 4142, which is there to actually protect the properties and the people inside. The Industrial Noise and Vibration Centre state environmental noise measurement to BS 4142 being technically simple, it is estimated by the regulator that over 80% of the reports are seriously inadequate. In particular, unnecessary or inappropriate use of BS 4142 is rife, exposing local residents to prolonged and unnecessary stress. There are many instances in the application where professional judgment is required and a range of interpretations is possible. So this is fully dependent on professional judgment. They set up 6 microphones. E, F and C were the ones that collated data. Microphone C was actually recorded the week before in different weather conditions and is inadmissible. The 2 microphones left, however, is microphone E, which is 500 metres away to the southeast in open field, and microphone F is 500 metres away to the west in open field. Now, all that's to be checked here is the position of the weather station and is it relative to the assessment. There's your weather station there. Does that look like open field? I don't think that can relate at all to open field. It states in the assessment document, the pictures supplied actually show the first one of the weather station facing east. That's that one there. And the second one, facing north. Now, if everybody's bought in to the screening of the noise in this noise assessment, then you've got to buy in at the screening of the weather station. As that sits there, that's getting blocked from the north wind. Go back to their photo, please. As that sits there, that's getting blocked from 20-metre high screening on the east, which actually manipulates all the results of this assessment. It states in the assessment document, when the speeds exceed 5 milliseconds, 5 metres per second, or there was precipitation present, data was discarded. And it also goes on to say no conditions were recorded which might have affected the measurement results. The microphones are in open field. You can see clearly there that's nothing like an open field. It says no conditions were recorded which might have affected the measurement results. This can only be true in the village protected area where the weather station sits. Therefore, completely untrue at the open field positions of the microphones, which means this assessment cannot be supported by BS 4142, which carries no weight of the material considerations of a noise assessment for this application. It is also clear in the title of this meeting it does not meet with the development standards. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Whitten.
Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Whitten? Councillor Durno?
Thanks for coming today, Glenn. I'm a bit confused about the noise assessment because obviously I live in the area as well, and we've got Condor, we've got guns going off, we've got heavy vehicles, we've got the industrial estate clanking, whatever, all the time. How would that not get picked up with the noise, because we've got helicopters, we've got everything going on all the time? So would that not get picked up on the noise assessment thing as well?
No,
That's
what this is on my written assessment, it discovered
The microphone.
on my written assessment, I covered noise travelling on the wind and by the physics of Mother Nature. They've got 135 inverters on there producing 65 decibels each, accumulatively 73 decibels. When that comes on the wind right in front of properties, when that goes on the wind, without even bringing in the battery bank, or the battery bank, which has totally been ignored at Loch Harbour, which is 2.5 times the size of anything else in the area. Your helicopters are spurious. You get a helicopter, that's 2 seconds. You're talking about continual noise. As soon as that comes to the summertime, those inverters will be running 24/7 from April till probably the end of September. And that is the difference of the noise assessment. And if you actually look back at anything that's written about the noise assessment, there's very little. There's just a comment where everybody thinks it's okay. Everybody's looked at the figures and said the figures are okay. The figures are totally manipulated. Just at a quick instance, they've put that 22 acres, which carries 70 inverters in front of my house. They've got the battery bank, which is 2.5 times the size of anything else in the area. They're not carried out any accumulative noise there. They've moved the 22 acres from Denfield House and put it in front of my house. Denfield House drops 16 decibels. What happens to my house? It actually drops 0.3 of a decibel. That's the night time through the window readings. They're actually telling me that the original screening, and that's where you're going here. If you're looking at that screening there and you believe in the screening for the noise, you've got to believe in that screening there of the wind. Okay.
Any other questions? Can't see it. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Putin. Just before we bring any other speakers in, Mr. Petrie, online environmental health, can you come in and just give any comment on what you've just heard?
Hello, convener. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I've assessed the noise impact assessment. I'm happy with the results of the noise impact assessment. It's been robustly modelled. It's been modelled along with the meteorology. The standard that was used to model is ISO 9613. That assumes slight downwind propagation of the noise. The conditions we've recommended are very robust, and it simply would not be in the applicant's interest to underestimate the noise when we've set these conditions, because applying remedial measures after the site's been built costs much more money than building them into the actual construction of the site. All in all, happy that the noise assessment's relatively robust and the conditions we've recommended can be met.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Peter, for that. Just for more information, thank you. Okay, we'll move on. We have Mr. Ian Anderson. Morning, Mr. Anderson. If you'd like to do the same here, please. And just when you're ready, just start and say, I'll give you a nod for each 4 minutes, okay? Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak on the application. My wife and I live at Denfield Steadings, which is in direct line of sight of the proposal. Our objection is set out in letter number 2 in the report's appendix. Our principal concerns are, firstly, that the development, in combination with other nearby existing and proposed developments, would have a significant visual impact and change the character of the local landscape from open countryside to a semi-industrialised energy park. Second, it is immediately next to a busy local road and footpath, which currently enjoys sweeping views over rolling countryside to the coast and Fife. The report has made it clear that the unsightly nature of the development requires it to be hidden. The proposed screening would not mitigate or offset the undesirable impact. Rather, it would obliterate views to the great detriment of anyone using the road and footpath. Third, it would also be very close to around 30 houses. Mr. Freeman's letter to the applicants regarding the original application referred to the use of the lavender test and advised that the application would adversely affect residential amenity and thus unlikely to be approved. I suggest that the current proposal is as equally at odds with that test and as unacceptable as the original. Fourth, the proposal would result in the loss of prime agricultural land in exchange for a minimal contribution to the supply of renewable energy. The solar farm would contribute only a very small amount of renewable energy at the cost of significant damage to the local landscape and amenity. Its output would be less than that from 2 of the Sea Green's offshore turbines, whose landscape and visual impact on Angus are minimal. I would also like to comment on an additional matter. It would appear that the grid connection to the development may not be available until at least 2032. The application makes no mention of this, the matter only coming to light when Mr. Hunter's email to Mr. Petrie was published in December. Planning permissions normally expire 3 years from the date of approval, and for good reason. To extend this period to 8 years in the knowledge that development would not be implemented for at least 8 years, if at all, would be contrary to recognised planning practice and limit opportunities for solar development elsewhere in the locality. It would merely serve to benefit the applicant by increasing the asset value of the farmland. The crux of this case, I think, is the degree to which adverse environmental impacts are overruled by supposed gains in providing renewable energy. If you agree that the development would significantly alter the landscape character of the area, would significantly reduce the residential amenity of residents, and greatly reduce the restful experience of those using the footpath and users of the road, then you would disagree with the report's contention that it complies with local and national planning policies. Rather, it would be contrary to the policies of the approved development plan and the national planning framework. The minimal contribution that the development would make to the supply of renewable energy does not justify the environmental damage that would benefit. The committee did, of course, recently refuse a similar application at Cotton of Lowney for the very same reasons, a decision ratified on appeal by Scottish ministers. The development would also fail to comply with the Council's own strategic assessment for this type of development. Although it is within the zone of medium capacity, the Council study makes it clear that solar developments should, and I quote, avoid higher, more open areas and sloping landforms where visibility is likely to be high. The Council's own study therefore concluded that solar farms in this area should avoid sites such as the one at Denfield. I therefore suggest that your conclusion should be to refuse the application, as it is in fact contrary to the development plan and to the Council's own strategic capacity assessment and to national planning policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr Anderson. Again, opportunity for questions from elected members. No? Okay, thanks very much, Mr Anderson. Thank you. Okay, we have one further speaker, Mr. Is it Gary Robinson? Mr. Robinson, you're online. Yep, we can hear you. We can hear you, Mr. Robinson. Okay, again okay, for yourself, Mr. Robinson. I'll give you 5 minutes again for your presentation, and then if you just stay online for any potential questions from members. Okay, go ahead.
I certainly will. Yeah. A bit far to call it a presentation, convener, but I'll do my very best. Convener, councillors, and council officers, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I feel quite famous now because my house has been featured in that presentation. I live at Linden Lee, which is directly across from the proposed development. And my few minutes is really around the human aspect of this. And it seems to me that going through this process, which is quite new to me, I have to be honest, that the human aspect of developments like this is something that becomes a little bit lower down the ladder of priorities, I suppose, sometimes, because we quite rightly talk about wildlife, we talk about the noise, and my neighbours were extremely eloquent about putting their cases forward, but I just really want to talk about the human aspect of this development from my point of view. So I moved into Linden Lee just over a year ago with no knowledge of this development coming up, but that's neither here nor there. And moved in this property with my mum, who's 76, my partner, and my dog. And we moved here because it really is a privilege to live in a place like this, and you pay for that, but it really is a privilege. We've sunk every penny that we've got into this property, and we're sinking even more money in. And my neighbours have spent, like we all do with our properties, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds into living in an area in which we absolutely adore and love. And I think for me, the word is privilege here. And I'm just going to take you outside. Hopefully I won't lose the signal in just a second. I think there's just a few other things to think about, which my neighbours have already spoken about. And it's about, while I have no intention of selling this property whatsoever, but it is about the money that we would lose on our investments. I haven't seen a lot of evidence regarding, in terms of how much power this field is going to give in terms of power to Scotland. And I'm sure that whether it's going to go abroad or it's going to go south of the border, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not completely au fait with these matters, and this is why I decided to go down the route of the human touch. And I think that, yeah, do you know what? I'm just going to take you outside. I'm going to switch my camera around, hopefully, and take you outside. And this is what we come out to every day. And I don't think this should be ignored. Oh, there was a couple of other things as well. So this is our view. This is what we bought our property for. And this, whether it's got whether it's or additional bushes, we're never going to replace this. This is what we come out to every day. And this is what I talk about, the privilege. There was also some comment about the speed limit. Can I tell you that although it gets to 30 hours, people drive like maniacs, incidentally, down this road. So there's a worry. And also you can hear the wind in the background, which isn't too bad. But during the last storm, a couple of Fridays ago, there was significant damage done to some of the properties and the roofs and what have you. So I'm very concerned about the wind aspect, the wind that comes here as well. So that's our view. I wanted to share that with you because, again, for me, it is about the human aspect as well as the technical aspect that my neighbours have spoken about. So that's it. It's very simple. It's just from a layman's point of view. I don't have any technical spec on this, but I really want you to consider our point of view and what we are going to lose should this development go ahead. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Mr Robinson, thank you very much indeed. Again, the opportunity for members to ask any questions. Mr Robinson? No? Okay, Mr Robinson, thank you for your time this morning. Indeed, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, gents. Again, Mr Fotheringham, I take it you want to address committee? Yes. Okay. Again, you'll have 5 minutes as well, Mr Fotheringham, and then if you can both remain for questions from members. Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lee Fotheringham from Voight Architects. We're acting as the agent for the application. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mr Taylor for the detailed overview of the proposal and the Plan Department's assessment. To reiterate, the proposed development at Denfield Farm for both solar and battery storage is strongly supported by Angus Council's local development plan, particularly policy V9, renewable and low carbon energy development. The development also aligns with Angus Council's strategic landscape capacity assessment for energy. On a national level, the proposal is backed by MPF4, including policy 1, tackling climate and nature crisis, policy 2, climate mitigation and adaptation, and policy 11, energy. Additionally, I'd like to highlight that no objections have been raised by any statutory consultees. Given that Angus Council, like many other local authorities, are not currently providing a formal pre-application service, we initially submitted a plan application in mid-2023, based on our own policy-led assessment. Following the submission, we received a mix of positive and negative feedback from the Plan Department, as well as public objections. Taking these comments into account, we revised the layout to better reflect the feedback received. To ensure meaningful engagement, we held a non-compulsory public consultation event attended by approximately 20 to 30 people, where we presented the revised layout and addressed many questions. We further refined the design based on the feedback from the event, and we also met with neighbouring residents on site on at least 2 separate occasions to discuss their concerns directly. Some of the key mitigations we took from that point were where there were no residential properties, we moved the development closer to the road, which allowed us to increase buffer distances between the solar panels and nearby homes. Properties to the north of the development now have approximately 190 metres of separation, with most panels positioned at a lower elevation, minimising visual impact. Properties to the east have approximately 120 metres of separation. The solar development will be screened to the north, east and south by 2 to 3 high metre continuous landscaping, which will be implemented well before any panels are installed. New and improved planting will also follow the field boundary, further screening the development while carefully leaving gaps, as requested by neighbours, to preserve views over the site to views beyond. Following an extensive consultation process and the receipt of updated third-party reports, including ecological, noise, land and visual impact, and glint and glare assessments, we formally withdrew the 2023 application and submitted a brand new application demonstrating the revised proposal presented today. We acknowledge that some objectors may oppose to any development in these fields. However, we hope that our proactive engagement and significant mitigation efforts demonstrate our commitment to addressing the concerns. Thank you for your time. We're both available for questions if you need anything.
Right, thank you, Mr Fotheringham. So, members, do any members have any questions for the applicants? We'll start with you, Councillor Durno.
Right, thank you. If the application is not going to be hooked up to the grid until 2032, will the panels not be put in the field until nearer that time, or would they be put in the field and then just left unconnected? Well, that's one question. And the second question is, with advanced technology, in 8 years' time, could there be a possibility that the solar panels may be different from the ones originally just now, and maybe noise concerns may be adapted, because obviously technology changes all the time? Is this something you could answer? Thanks.
So in terms of the panels being In terms of the panels being installed ahead of time, I think one of the conditions read that the panels cannot be installed until 5 years after the advanced landscaping. So at least that time scale. As far as technology, I think Tom's maybe best.
So the efficiency of solar panels has improved massively over the last 20 years. However, there is a technical limit that the solar panels will reach in terms of conversion efficiency. So the size of those panels and the power of those panels is kind of it's plateauing, it's peaking out. But what you will find is that, much like with the noise impact assessments and the overestimation on the decibel output of the inverters, they're just transformers. So back in the day, 20, 15 years ago, they'd have a coil on one side, a coil on the other, and they'd be very noisy. Now inverters, they're transformerless, and so they don't have those same coils in there. And they have been for some time, but they will continue to get quieter. By how much? I obviously can't say, but 2032 is 8 years down the line, compared to a lot of the battery and inverter and solar PV technology from 8 to 10 years ago. There has been massive technical improvements.
Thanks for that. Obviously, I've been on the committee for 8 years, so obviously things change. Thank you.
Any other? Oh, Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. The issue of containing contaminated runoff has been raised a few times. I'm conscious that there's a condition that will deal with that. But I wonder, just before any decision is reached, if you have any specific measures in mind that you can tell to the committee to deal with that, and in particular some of the things that have been raised about any impact of runoff into the watercourse that's there as well. And my colleague has raised the possibility of a bund. Are these things that you've already had a think about in advance of the condition?
Okay, so ultimately, contaminant runoff occurs when fire suppression would take place. Fire suppression is the last line of defence for when there might be thermal runaway or fire within a battery energy system. In advance of that, there's many best practice measures that would hope to mitigate any of that risk taking place. So without being long-winded, but trying to work through it logically, because this is something that would be put in place by a manufacturer from their product range, a particular model in the future. Batteries are a combination of cells that are all wrapped together. Each of those cells has an individual smaller risk of being damaged through thermal or mechanical or electrical contact, sort of manufacturing issues. So some of the sort of measures that need to be put in place are appropriate product selection, so appropriate manufacturer selection, so appropriate mechanical cell toughness selection and the quality of manufacturing. Beyond all of that, reaching, in order to sort of answer your question with the fire suppression, that the overall battery energy development, it needs to be the risk of heat build-up needs to be managed. So heat build-up does occur in batteries as they're used. The batteries become, or the cells become less efficient the hotter they are. And so there is a battery energy management and monitoring system that's in place around that differ between different manufacturers. And there have been battery systems that have been in place for the last 20 years. So what you find is the battery energy management system is your first line of defence. And it's your first line of defence by looking at the charge, looking at the temperature build-up, and discreetly from a decentralised basis, being able to optimise and to manage each of those cells or those cell racks, the battery racks, such that heat builds up and therefore the risk of a fire doesn't increase. I hope that I'm leading towards answering your question, but okay, apologies.
You're not. The specific question that I raised was around kind of the physical mitigations that you would put in place to deal with the runoff. I understand the concept of fire suppression measures in advance of that, but what I'm asking you is what happens to that water once it's out there? Because there's a water course right next to where the battery energy storage system is. My colleague, Councillor Beattie, has mentioned about a bund. You're talking about product selections. Surely you have something in mind if you're at this advanced stage. You've brought a development proposal to us. You're telling me you have no idea what kind of mitigations that you would put in place off that shelf of products?
No, I'm not. Okay, so abundant toxic runoff, you would look to decrease the volume. A very large increase, a very large amount of water, for example, trying to manage this fire would result in a very large abundance, a very large amount of water that would need to be, the volume flow mitigated from running off into the burn. There's no preferred or accepted way to manage fire suppression. Water is one, foam is one, sprinkler is one, but actually things that are like aerosol fire suppressions are more commonly the solution that's used in order to ensure that there isn't massive amounts of litres of water that need to be stored on site, or water that's brought to site in order to mitigate any fire suppression.
You content with that, Councillor Melville? Okay. Okay, thanks very much on that one, Mr. Mackay. Councillor Beattie, off you go.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Even with gaseous fire suppression, when these batteries go on fire, they do produce some horrifically toxic compounds. Those compounds exist in that site. How do we keep them in that site and stop them from getting off that site into that burn? You've got compounds like hydrogen fluoride. I mean, these are horrific things, okay? Very toxic, right next to a burn. You're not really selling that to me at the minute.
So at this stage, as part of the planning application, the conditions that have been put in place, we have been asked to submit in due course that will be reviewed and approved by yourselves, a fire and safety management plan. So unfortunately at this stage, I can't quantify and physically say how some of these toxic, it's not so much the hard toxic materials, I understand the risk. The risk is actually with leading towards thermal runaway is the build-up of toxic gases, and toxic gases are dealt with ventilation. But I can't speak to you specifically about ventilation systems, but I can talk to you about the best practice process in order to prevent, prevention is better than cure, to ensure that toxic gas build-up doesn't occur in the first place. And that does come from battery energy management. That does come from thermal imaging. That does come from having a decentralised setup whereby if there is a risk, there's individual cells, there's individual batteries that are shut down. And that does come by, appropriate quality manufacturing. That's quite the second, unless there's a more direct question. I'm sorry, the best I can answer.
Yeah, Councillor Beattie, come back on this, but I'm going to bring Mr. Taylor after that, but if you could go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen battery energy storage systems applications, quite a few of them now. We're getting used to them. Okay, some of the applicants have thought ahead and have actually incorporated this sort of thing. Okay, and they've been approved. Not seeing it here. It's a comment, really.
Okay, thanks. I thought I'd just bring in Mr. Taylor here just to address the matters on the conditions, just so people are quite clear how the approach and the conditions would affect the questions you're asking. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, obviously I'm not going to provide a particularly technical answer to that question, but just to reassure members, as I touched upon in the presentation, is set out in condition 3H of the report, there is a requirement for the applicant to submit a fire and safety management plan, including the steps that would be provided to deal with the issues you're describing. There will be an expectation on behalf of officers that will be carried out by an appropriately qualified professional. And if necessary, we could have dialogue with the appropriate environmental agency to pick up that matter if that would provide any reassurance to members.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Before you we'll go to Councillor Cowdy, please.
Thank you. So predictably, this is on this subject. I'm just not sure. I'm not satisfied with what I've heard so far, to be honest. It may be a question for officers based on what you've just said there, or it may be for the applicant, but what I would like to see is the condition making sure that in the event of a last line of defence and there is a fire, that toxic runoff does not get into the burn. It is kept on site, however that happens. And it doesn't sound like the conditions that you're proposing is particularly specific with that regard. And I'm speaking as this is my ward as it happens. I know Hercules Burn, I know the biodiversity in there, and I know looking locationally, this is a particularly risky situation if we cannot have a cast iron guarantee that runoff in the event of a fire will not get into that burn. So is that something we can incorporate into a condition?
Thanks, Councillor Curry. If you just stay on, we'll get Mr Taylor to respond to that.
So the condition explicitly refers to an expectation that the applicant will identify measures to minimise potential for any untreated water from the battery storage containers or batteries arising because of an emergency situation to leave the site. It specifically refers to a requirement for measures to be identified to prevent contaminated water leaving the site. Hopefully.
Sorry, I just want to come back on that because it's not saying that, it's saying minimise. It's not saying prevent. You've just read it out. So can I just clarify which one it is? To prevent or to minimise the risk of?
The wording of the condition, as you correctly point out, is minimise. It's obviously a risk-based approach. We would ask them to set out all reasonable steps to prevent water leaving the site. Certainly, we could amend the wording of the condition if that provides a sort of reassurance.
Yes, to me it would provide a reassurance. Thank you. Sorry to keep butting in.
No, that's perfectly fine, Councillor Cowdery. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I think we're talking about condition H, whatever it is, 3H or whatever. I mean, presumably what we would do, Mr Taylor, is we would speak to the applicant, we would speak to fire and safety advice, how much water could potentially be used, and are we putting in a, whatever you call it, a storage tank to take the expected amount of water, and that prevents the water getting into Hercules Burn. Is that, simplistically, that's what we would need to do?
I would have thought exactly that, yes.
That could be covered either by H or by enhancing the wording in H.
I would believe it would. It could, yes.
Councillor Doran.
Thank you. So just following on, and I think this is really important as well. Is that creating a condition that's attainable? I'm presuming this is then relating to the legislation that doesn't yet exist, but we obviously want to make sure that anything that is implemented in Angus protects the environment that's there. So I just wanted to check in on that one with officers about, is that a condition that's achievable, or maybe with the applicant as well, developer.
Certainly, from my perspective, altering the wording of the condition to refer to measures to prevent that happening is explicit. As far as I'm concerned, that would comply with the test fair planning condition. Yeah, does that answer your question?
I think so. So it would be attainable. It wouldn't be, because obviously there's rules about like, I'm just referring to the rules about the conditions, that we can't put a condition in that would then make a development it wouldn't be able to be taken forward because of that condition. That makes sense.
From my perspective, that would comply with the terms of Circular 5 1998, yes.
Great, thank you.
Right, we got to now, we're on questions, aren't we, on this? Right, if there are no other questions from the floor, just to go back, Mr Mackay and Mr Fotheringham here, clearly, other than what we've just heard just now, landscaping and the impact, landscape mitigation is key here. So can you just, again, in your own words, explain to us, if people have read all through the report, the papers, it's quite clear that planting, one of the conditions is that planting should commence by December 2025 and should be completed by December 2026, and that actual building can't actually commence for 5 years after that, hence the reason why there's an 8-year perspective here. We're actually talking about 7 potential years before the actual build commences. So in that time, that allows sufficient time, obviously, for planting in there. Do you propose semi-mature planting? Because what I'm thinking about to further mitigation here is that we want this grown as sufficiently as possible, as early as possible, before building of the photocells and the battery container stores commences. What's your response to that?
Yeah, so there's an agreed advanced planting plan done that specifies different maturities of trees for different areas of the site. Obviously, the hedging will be different to, say, the trees, for example, but yeah, they will be semi-mature to at least give it a head start ahead of everything else, to give it every chance it's got.
You're saying it'll be semi-mature planting?
It will be at certain areas, yeah.
Right, okay.
Thank you very much, Convener. We've had a lot of letters of complaint. This development would be an industrial carbuncle on one of the approach roads to Arbroath. I believe there are more suitable sites for this type of product rather than on prime agricultural ground. As with the public concerns, I would not be approving the application on the grounds of the Scottish Government's NPF 4 policy 29E. The policy, the impact on local living, an unacceptable impact on the local amenity or character of a neighbourhood or area. So I would not be in favour of this application.
Thank you, Mr Nicholl. Further comments from any members? Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. This is a difficult balance to strike, I think. My record on this committee has been fairly pro solar development, but I think my policy has always been that it needs to be in the right place and with the right mitigations in place. The questions that I asked and other members have asked are specific, and in particular on the management of contaminants, not just contaminated water, but as Councillor Beattie has set out, the actual hazardous material inside the batteries themselves. I'm not remotely convinced by what I heard from the applicant. I have to say I'm quite disappointed by that, as Councillor Beattie has pointed out. Other applications which have come before us have put in a lot more detail about the measures that they'll put in place. That being said, if the wording of the condition was strengthened, then I may have to reconsider that position, but at the moment I'm not particularly convinced by what I've heard on those measures.
Okay. Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Nicholl and with Councillor Melville. Yeah, 29E, absolutely, I agree with that. And also 11E as well, the impacts on communities and individual dwellings, including residential amenity. I'm not convinced with the answers given by the applicant about what would happen in the event of a last chance emergency. So, yeah, I will not support this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Beattie. I would actually like to hear from most members today, if possible, before we go to take it further. But we'll start with Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener. We see a lot of these type of applications now. This one's a bit different in that they're seeking from the outset 8 years to make a start to this because of the availability of grid connection. And I do have concerns about this because if my understanding is correct, if we grant permission today with the conditions as they are in place, then, well, by the time we start developing the site for solar production, these conditions might look very out of date and very and pretty much obsolete because things are moving on. So I do have big concerns about this. I also have big concerns because we're told that prime agricultural land, that it's prime agricultural land, we can't use that as an objection, but then we've got, and we've been through an appeal process that came to that conclusion, and now in P&K apparently ministers have pulled in an application. So I really am a bit of a quandary as to how we handle this.
Okay, Councillor Bayes, thanks for your point. Councillor Cowdy?
Thank you. Yeah, similar to Councillor Brays, I'm concerned about the long timescale before which anything is actually put in place, and anything that could develop in terms of technology during that time. I'm also very disappointed in the responses given to mitigating environmental impact of runoff. I'm a bit sad that we're having to ask for a strengthened condition. I think I would have liked to have seen that proactively discussed by the applicant. So I'm also very torn on this one, but I would like clarification that the strengthened condition would absolutely be in place if this is approved.
Thanks, Councillor Cowdy. Councillor Dorn?
Hi, thank you. Similar to Councillor Cowdy and some of the others that have raised, I've got reservations here about the conditions that we have got in, and those being sufficient given the information that has been presented today. So that would be my concern with this application.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dorn. Councillor Durno?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Obviously, a lot of discussion on this one. Regarding contamination of the Hercules burn, a few years ago there was contamination in the Hercules burn, and SEPA couldn't find where the source was. We've got Condor at the back of this area. We've got an industrial site there with garages. There's all different kinds of things can end up in that burn. So a condition on this planning application doesn't necessarily mean that any contamination in that burn could come from this site. Also, a particular problem that we have in our area is with oilseed rape. The oilseed rape fields take up a lot of space, and they cause a lot of problems for people with breathing problems and general condition. The smell, it's awful. And I've looked up some solar farms online. Obviously, they're being put everywhere, and it says they just don't have to be about low carbon electricity. This could also help reverse biodiversity decline, because research has shown that wildflower meadows can benefit bumblebee foraging and bird nesting and boost the diversion of certain plants and invertebrates, compared to that of farmland if the panels are integrated with vegetation. And we have spoken before about how actually people put sheep in between solar panels because the sheep love the solar panels. So I think a lot of negativity coming in here. We're going forward. We're in 2025. Things will change in 5 years' time. So I think some of the comments here are going to be ironed out. And I think we should actually give this a chance, because we've got a power battery storage already in our Broad, and a lot of people don't even know it's there because it's covered up, by fences, etc. You can't see it's there. I didn't know it was there until I was out one day and somebody said it's over there. We've got, as I said before, we've got Condor, we've got high fences, we've got hedging. Nobody knows what's in Condor. Nobody can see Condor, what's going on there. So people in this area are used to having barriers and fences and fields with trees blocking things out. So I don't think that this application would be any different, and I think it should be approved. Thank you.
Councillor Duff?
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I've listened to the comments made by the objectors. I've read the papers. I think we have to be very clear that we have to look at applications in relation to MPF4. And MPF4 is very strong on renewable energy and the need for that, and we all know about the need to decarbonise. We have seen a considerable number of solar farms come forward in battery development schemes. We've got a very helpful spreadsheet which officers have circulated ahead of this meeting, which gives us that we are currently using less than 2% of prime agricultural land for solar farms either installed or approved and battery storage. 2% does not concern me. I think the question is how much, and I've suggested before that is a decision that's way above our pay grade, and we need somebody in Scottish Government to give us some more clear guidance on that. And I think they're starting to think about that now, I think, from what I've heard. So that's the thing. I think there's a fundamental difference between this one and the Cotton of Lowney at Kingsmuir. and that was recommended for a refusal by officers for effectively on visual amenity grounds. In this occasion, officers are recommending approval. I think, like colleagues, I think that clearly the applicant hasn't given enough thought to containment of fire water potentially contaminated. Now, other applicants have given us perhaps more fuller plans there, but I think if we put in a suitably strong condition, it's surely just a question of this applicant lifting and shifting whatever we find acceptable elsewhere. Clearly, I think it's still going to be a risk-based approach, but however big a container you put in, there is the question, is it big enough or not? And that has to be done on some sort of risk-based. You'll never get a 100% guarantee, but you can increase the probability that you contain the amount of wastewater in a suitably sized vessel. And that's, I think, what's required. I think maybe condition, if we agree to approve it, 3H needs to be beefed up. But I don't think anyone should kid themselves. You will never get a 100% guarantee you'll contain all the fire water, because it depends how much are you going to use. And maybe the fire people can give you a clear guidance on that, but I suspect there is still going to be a risk-based, it's still going to have to be risk-based. Because it complies, in my view, with MPF4, I think for me, I would support the officer's recommendation. I know there are local objections. There always are local objections to every one of those schemes. And in relation to the number of objections, 20 objections is quite a lot, but I've seen some schemes which have been objected by a lot more people. So I would be supporting the officers on this occasion.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Any other comments from members? I'll just bring in Mr. Taylor again, just maybe in response to one or two things he's heard from members' comments. Mr. Taylor?
I think this is probably a criticism of my presentation more than anything. So we obviously have considered a number of different battery storage developments in Angus in various locations, including quite close to the site in Arbroath. And this issue of fire safety has come up on several occasions. And as members correctly point out, it's something we've tried to generally tackle in planning conditions. So my point of apology really is to just emphasise that the battery storage systems that we've approved elsewhere have usually been 30 or 40, 50 battery storage units. This development is 2 battery storage units. 2. The planning condition that's proposed can be reworded to make it more robust and tight, but I just wanted to make sure members were aware, because I obviously didn't make that very clear in the presentation. I apologise. We are talking about the battery storage aspect of this proposal is extremely small scale.
Thanks for the clarification, Mr. Taylor. No further comments. Oh, sorry. Councillor Brace, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, just on the back of what I've heard, also there are no objections from the statutory consultees, including the Community Council. When it comes to the use of prime arable land, I think we really do need some guidance, because technically every single acre of prime arable land could be used for solar farm in Angus as it stands just now. There is no limit, and we really need, if the Scottish ministers, if Scottish government's content with that position, I would have great worries, but so far there is no limit. So these are big considerations for me in this, and the other thing is, if we have robust conditions, we can, I think, deal with the whole question of water storage funding. We can do that. And my final point is that it's really difficult to find anywhere on prime arable land that's a good distance of separation from a burn. That's the nature of arable land. It's been drained. It requires ditches to drain it. That's just the nature of the beast. There's plenty upland slopes that could be developed for solar panels, but grid connection's the problem. So we are where we are, and I think we have to make the best of it.
Thanks, Councillor Bates. Councillor Don, you can come back in.
So, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, if we're going to the vote on it, whether we are voting on the strengthened conditions as discussed, if that's going ahead, or as it stands at the minute. So just to clarify that, thank you.
Yeah, I'll come to that, Councillor Dorn, when all comments are finished. Councillor de Gowdy.
That was also my question. Thank you.
Right. No further comments at all for the moment. Okay. Okay, we'll move to sum up on all of this. I do thank everybody for the representations today, both speakers and members on this application. This isn't straightforward by any manner of means, even in comparison with previous applications similar to this. But I do note the size of the application. But I read the room, and I know there seems to be concern about mitigation here in a number of factors, environmental factors, and also visual impact, etc. And some of that I'm content with. And I think that the conditions that officers have shown in item 10 on the paper, they cover the bulk of it. But I accept the fact that particularly condition 3H needs to be significantly strengthened, that would allow members to actually proceed, if that's their will on this, to carry on. So if I'm going to recommend approval of this subject to the conditions in paragraph 10, and that condition 3H is significantly changed to make it sure that I think the word we said, but that minimised would be changed for one part there to, the word we said, to prevent. That may be sufficient. Now that's not, I'm not minimising it just to that one concern, but I'm starting to think the conditions need to be looked at and perhaps strengthened, but not to the point where we need to significantly add more conditions to it. It's more, I think, a strengthening. So on the basis of that, that's what I'm putting forward. I won't go over the application. We've already heard that already fully today, but as members know, development plan and national policies provide strong support for proposals that provide for the generation of renewable energy. The proposal would give rise to impacts on the landscape, as we've heard, and visual amenity. It would result in increased traffic during the construction period. That is some time away, clearly, as we mentioned already this morning. It could be up to 5-6 years from now. And the impact on the amenity of recreational access would be impacted as well, with facility generating some noise. The adverse landscape, as we heard, would be localised, however, and a limited number of properties would experience significant visual impact. Mitigation, including a requirement for provision of advanced planting, as I mentioned, is proposed to reduce the impact, and residual impacts are not considered unacceptable by planning officers. The proposal is consistent with relevant Angus Local Development Plan and National Planning Framework 4 policies. So, as the proposal complies with the development plan policy, but subject to strengthening of conditions, I'm going to move approval of the application. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Durno, and I need to know if there are any amendments to that, or are they happy? Councillor Nicholl?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, I would state my policy, NFP policy 29E1 should stand as well. Also, we should not be rewriting an application at this meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Yeah, I think we need to be quite sure about that. Bring in Mr. Taylor here for a second.
Sorry, can I just clarify the policy reference there, Councillor Nicholl? I don't see a policy 29E. As far as I can see, it stops at D.
Well, it's in my NFP pack anyway, policy 29E. The policy, the impact on local living and an unacceptable impact on the local amenity or character of the neighbourhood or area.
Sarah, do you want to come in just for a second, please?
just wonder if maybe there's an opportunity here for a recess for 5 minutes,
I was
just
gonna
to consider that amendment with Councillor Nicholl.
I think on the basis that there's a recommendation for approval and an amendment that we would do a recess on this. So I'm going to suggest actually, bearing in mind we've already been here for an hour and a half, a 10-minute recess for a comfort break and to consider the applicant of the amendment. Councillor Melville, you want to speak?
Do you need a seconder for the amendment?
Pardon?
Do you need a seconder for the amendment? Or is that going to happen after the recess?
I think once we check the validity of the amendment, then we may go for a seconder. Okay, but 10-minute recess. We'll come back here at 10:44. Sorry, 11:44.
Pause the live stream, please.
Welcome back, everyone. I think taking a bit longer with this application, and we have to take whatever time is required for due process here. However, we heard from Councillor Nicholl prior to the recess that there'll be an amendment. I just want to go back for clarity here. The recommendation, bearing in mind everything we've heard so far this morning, I'm going to recommend approval of the application subject to the conditions as stated, but also that condition 3H in paragraph 10, the word minimise is changed to the word prevent. Other than that, the other conditions there, I believe, do satisfy and mitigate the bulk of the concerns that have been stated. I'm aware that the planting has to start in 2025, has to finish by 2026. It could be 5 years after that before work develops here, and in that time technology can change significantly. But on the basis of what's there just now, I'm going to recommend approval, as I say, subject to the change in paragraph condition 3H. And Councillor Dunn, you're still happy to second that? We have an amendment. Do you want to restate your amendment, Councillor Nicholl, please?
Thank you very much, Convener. My apologies. Instead of saying B, it should have, and I said E. This B development proposals in rural areas should be suitably scaled and sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area. As you say, it might be 5 years before this development comes, but the area and the views of the area will still be there in 5 years. And I do not think we should be rewriting an application. It should come forward in its full strength as we would approve it, not alter it to suit. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nicholl, do we have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Beattie? Okay. Sarah, we'll go to a vote, I take it.
Yes, thank you, Convener. The motion by yourself, Convener, seconded by Councillor Durnall, is to approve the application for the reason and subject to the conditions detailed in the report, but that's subject to the amendment of condition 3H to replace the word minimise with the word prevent. And the amendment by Councillor Nicholl, seconded by Councillor Beattie, is to refuse the application as the proposal is contrary to Policy 29B of NPF 4 in that the proposal in this rural area is not of a suitable scale or design or in keeping with the character of the area. Please vote motion or amendment.
Convener?
Okay.
Convener?
Motion.
Councillor Durnall?
Motion.
Councillor Beattie?
Amendment.
Councillor Braze?
Motion.
Councillor Cowdy?
Motion.
Councillor Dornan?
Motion.
Councillor Duff?
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham?
Amendment.
Councillor Gall?
Motion.
Councillor McLaren?
Motion.
Councillor Melville?
Amendment.
And Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Thank you. The motion is 9. Sorry, that was 9. Sorry. Thank you. There is 9 votes for the motion and 4 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the motion is carried.
I think it's 8 votes for the motion.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. 8. Do you want me to read that out?
Yes, please.
Apologies. There is 8 votes for the motion and 4 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the motion is carried.
Right, thank you. In that case, just to be clear, planning application number 24/00589 full is hereby approved, subject to conditions stated. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your contributions. We'll move on to agenda item 7 now. Right, agenda item 7 relates to report 42/25. This report deals with planning application 24/00460 full, submitted on behalf of Letham Craft Shop for proposed extension at 11 Old Bar Road, Letham, to create a new cafe area and storage and to enlarge the existing sale area and external works to provide for additional customer parking, pedestrian paths and outdoor seating. I think, Mr Taylor, you're dealing with this one again? Over to you.
Thank you, Convener. As you have alluded to, item 7 is another local level planning application. This time it relates to the established cafe and craft shop at Letham, 11 Old Bar Road. The application relates to alterations and extension to the property to create a new cafe, relocating it from elsewhere within the existing building, additional storage and to enlarge the sales area with associated works including additional parking and an outdoor seating area. So the application site, as illustrated on the left-hand side, is located within the village of Letham towards the north.
I'll just pause you for a second. Councillor Cowdy, yeah, you're back. Okay, I thought I just lost you. Sorry, carry on, Mr Taylor.
Thank you. So the application site itself is located to the north of the village of Letham on the east side of Old Bar Road. It's around about 300 metres to the north of the square, which is a location where there's bus services, I think an hourly bus service, which connects Arbroath with Forfar. Letham is identified in the local development plan as a rural service centre, being one of the larger villages in Angus. And what that means is it's an area where we have considered it appropriate to allocate additional housing development, and in support of that housing, it is desirable to preserve and enhance the existing services which sustain that community. So, in general terms, the development plan is supportive of appropriately designed rural development where identified impacts can be appropriately mitigated. So this is an application which has attracted a fairly significant level of public interest, and there are 21 objections as well as comments from the Community Council. By and large, those comments provide sort of positive or recognise that there is a benefit in enhancing the operation of the business, but they identify a number of concerns, and I will touch upon those concerns as I go through the few slides that I have. The bottom right-hand side, we can see a bit more detail on the application site itself. It's located or identified by the red polygon. The property which is attached to it is also understood to be in the same ownership as the business. On the left-hand side of the site, we can see Old Bar Road, which goes sort of north-south towards the centre of Letham. It's wide enough for two-way traffic, and there is space on that public road for car parking. On the sort of southeast side of the site, incorporating an area of the site, we have a green lane which connects Old Bar Road to part of the core path network, which sits to the north of the site. That green road, it's understood access rights apply to it. It's likely to be a public right of way, and that's one of the main issues identified in objections, and I'll touch upon that as we go through, but the development would not preclude public access or use of that route. So on the left-hand side, we have a site plan. This shows the proposed development and the proposed downtaking. So on the Old Bar Road side of the site, more traditionally sort of designed buildings would be retained, largely unaltered, but there'd be fairly significant downtakings on the south side of the building and on the east side of the building, where there are some stone-built, dilapidated type cottages. There is a static caravan located in this area. And the building is really sort of a patchwork quilt as it's evolved, of designs as it's evolved over time. And the application before us would sort of rationalise the design of the building and re-emphasise the entrance to the structure on the south side of the building. So, as I've indicated, downtakings are shown in red. Those are the areas that will be removed. On the top right-hand side, we can see the caravan adjacent to the green lane that would come away, as well as the stone dilapidated cottage, which is shown on the right-hand side at the bottom right of the slide. You can see the green lane, which has been the source of public comment, shown in the top right photograph. As we'll see in subsequent plans, access along that route would be maintained and would not be prevented as a consequence of development, and planning conditions are proposed to ensure that would be the case. But in terms of traffic using that is an existing arrangement. One of the two car parking areas serving the business accesses using a section of that green lane. That car parking area will be extended further to the sort of northeast of the site. In terms of the revised arrangement, so on the left-hand side we have the sort of floor plans. The area identified in yellow would be the new cafe, and the enlarged retail space, the ground floor area, is shown outside of the yellow. You can see the enlarged parking area accessed up the green lane, which is located in this area. So within that, there will be 12 spaces when you combine the proposed car park into the existing car parking shown to the northwest of the building. Within the site curtilage, there will be an outdoor seating area, there will be cycle parking, and it's worth pointing out as well, the site is relatively well located in terms of access to sustainable travel. It's connected to, closely connected to existing path networks within the village. It is reasonably accessible to the bus service and walkable to most people that would live within the village. The craft retail space would be increased from around 230 square metres to 400 square metres, and the cafe increased from around 130 to 280. But as I say, this would consolidate the operation, provide a more welcoming appearance to the south side of the site, as we'll see in the subsequent slides. Starting with photographs of the site as existing, so the top two photographs are the sort of appearance of the site from Old Bar Road. That will be largely unaltered. I think the plan suggests this small area of flat roof would come away, but there are sections of flat roof to the rear of the building that will be continued, but largely unaltered in terms of the appearance from this part of Old Bar Road. This image on the bottom shows that there is a collection of other things happening on the south side of the building, and the application would very much sort of tidy up that area and consolidate the design, provide a more welcoming appearance. And as you can see bottom right, that would be a positive thing in terms of users of the green path to have that tidied up, and also increase natural surveillance of the green route. So in terms of elevations, bottom right first, you can see the existing structure. So the appearance of the existing structure onto Old Bar Road, largely similar to as is at the situation at the moment. And the other three slides show the sort of new entrance that will be introduced. So it's a significant design enhancement, a significant enhancement to what is a well-used community facility in that part of the village. Moving on to the main issues raised in representations, and I've summarised them as three main issues, and they are all addressed in the report. Those representations, as well as comments from the Community Council, as I've indicated, do suggest that do acknowledge in some cases that it would be beneficial to see the site tidied up and to enhance the offering, but they raise concerns about three main matters. Firstly, land ownership. In that respect, there's some suggestion from third parties that the applicant doesn't own all of the site, which includes part of the green lane extending beyond the car parking area. But the applicant has completed the appropriate land ownership certificate, and that's as far as planning legislation really lets us be involved in that matter. Land ownership is not a material planning consideration, and the applicant has indicated they have certified that they own that area of the site. In any case, the main concern that relates to that is public access, and as you can see in the illustration, the green road would continue to be open. There's no proposal to introduce barriers or to prevent public access along that route. In terms of parking provision, the parking provision would be increased to accommodate the development. The level of parking provided is below the sort of the road standard would typically expect for this type of development. But members will be aware that MPF4 policy is supportive of low parking solutions in areas which are reasonably well located in terms of sustainable travel. The road service has considered both parking and access arrangements, and they have no objection to the proposal, indicating there is availability of on-street parking in the area. This is a 20-mile-an-hour section of the public road, and the applicants also indicated they have a sort of informal arrangement with the village hall, where the village hall car park, when available, can be used for overspill parking were that necessary. So, development plan policy, very much supportive of rural development, appropriate rural development, and this is a location in a rural service centre where it will be desirable to see that type of development come forward to sustain the village of Letham. You can see the illustration on the left-hand side shows that that would be a significant enhancement to the south side of the building, increasing surveillance of the path that runs adjacent to the site. The proposal is broadly compliant with the planning policy. The matters raised in the public comments are understood and have been addressed in the report before members. The main issue is access. Access would be maintained. There are conditions proposed to ensure that's the case, to ensure clear delineation between the development itself and users of the path, to ensure appropriate surfacing of that section of the site, the track, and to ensure drainage will be provided. It's considered that the conditions relating to those matters and those which relate to amenity will be sufficient to mitigate the worst impacts or potential for impact on neighbouring property. There are no objections to this proposal from technical consultees. It complies with the development plan in the opinion of officers. There aren't considered in the opinion of officers to be any material considerations which would justify refusal of planning permission, and on that basis it's recommended for approval.
Thanks, Mr Taylor. We'll move on straight to questions for the officer. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you. It's a question, but more a confirmation. In page 99, 20, land ownership is a material planning consideration. Also, the applicant has provided certification the land is in the applicant's ownership. The bulk of the complaints is about ownership. Would this have any consideration in the planning application?
So, as suggested in the report, so the requirement of an applicant is to complete a land ownership certificate. So that's a declaration about the situation with ownership. The applicant has done that, but beyond that, land ownership is not a material planning matter. It's not the planning authorities to judge who does or doesn't own a site. There's an expectation that the appropriate certification is completed, and that's happened in this case, and that is the extent of our consideration of that matter.
Councillor Donnell.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. On the top picture, I don't know if you could blow it up a wee bit more, but I don't know if it's actually in the papers. The new car park that's there, will visitors go in a new entrance from that? Because one of the problems that led to the parking on the street, because there's a little car park at the front at the moment, is that if it was full, people parked on the street, because some people that go to this facility are quite elderly and they can't walk very far. So just wondering if the new car park has got a new entrance from the car park into the building, so that people don't have to walk around the corner. But I can't really see.
Yes. So there is an existing vehicular access. A rabbit warren at the moment. There's a collection of different buildings. The development would sort of consolidate the spaces. It would improve accessibility to the building in terms of the new access you see on the south side of the building. Obviously, that would be designed to comply with modern building standards, so it's likely to enhance the accessibility of the building. But yes, there's space on the public road for any overspill parking that would be sort of created.
Councillor Cowdy.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a question regarding the Green Road and access, which I know is something that is of prime importance to people. I appreciate you're saying access will be maintained. In terms of people who are less mobile, for example, in wheelchairs, is there any change to the level of accessibility specifically to that Green Road? Is it being narrowed or widened or resurfaced or anything like that? Apologies if it's in the papers. I did have a look and I couldn't find it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. As far as I can see from the plans, there isn't any intention to narrow the Green Road. There would be some resurfacing, and I think the conditions suggest that shouldn't go beyond the sort of northeasterly most car parking space, if you can maybe see in the image. So the resurfacing shouldn't go beyond that, and it should be a porous finish to allow sort of continued drainage of the surface. Beyond the site, the Green Road, as you can maybe see in the bottom image, is sort of a grass surface, and that would continue to be the case following completion of development.
Thank you.
Councillor Melville.
Do we have the applicant here today?
We do have the applicant. He'll be taking questions.
Save my question till then.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Taylor on this one? Okay. In that case, we have one other speaker, Mr. Gary Anderson. Mr. Anderson, again, you've heard me say it this morning already. If you'd like to take a seat and turn the mic towards you, it's movable. And just ready to just put your mic on, and you've got 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to let me have voiced my opinion and of some other residents around the village and a local farmer. I think the craft shop's an amazing place. It's been there for a long, long time. I've been in the village for 50 years and yeah, it's a great asset to the village. Our main concern is the parking. There's 5 roads come onto that section of road, and you're not really meant to park next to a junction within 10 metres of the junction. That's not really been the case through the past years, but we've kind of accepted it. But I do feel it's reasonably dangerous. Quite often, farmers coming up, you see them up on the curb, squeezing along, old folk, try to walk up to the craft shop, and you're just like, one day, I just hope it never happens, but I can see it coming. So if you double the capacity of the craft shop, and even if you've got an overspill car park that's at the village hall, human nature, people are not going to walk from the village hall all the way up to the craft shop to gain access. So I think there should be double yellows just to make sure that they're not parking hard against the junctions, and just to make it safer for everybody. The road in question is a kind of at a crest of a hill, so by the time you're committed to take your manoeuvre, you do end up with a bottleneck there, and I can't see that getting any better if you double the capacity of the craft shop. And the additional parking, I can't see it being much greater than what's actually there at the moment, and it's definitely not double the capacity. At weekends and that, it is quite hard to negotiate those turns and bends to get in and out there. So it's more a safety issue on that front. And the second point that I have to make aware, I know it's probably not, and you have addressed most of the issues that have been raised, is the track down the back, the Green Road. And they say it will be kept open. How are we going to make sure it is kept open? And can we put signage up and saying this area must be kept clear? Because that is access to the back of the properties on Park Road. The opposite side of the craft shop, which is surrounded by roads, Mr. Stark's actually turned that into a car park. Now, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but that road's now blocked. So the only access we've got is through the road he's going to use for the new car park. And the other thing I thought would maybe bring up is there is a lot of land at the back of the craft shop which could be used for additional parking to get some more traffic off the road. Just that. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, thank you very much. Just in case there's any questions for you, are there any questions? If you keep your microphone on, Mr. Anderson. Councillor Beattie, do you want to go?
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, thanks very much for coming in. I'm really familiar with that shop. I get dragged there on occasion. Actually, it's not really a question for you, Mr. Anderson. It's more of a question for you, Mr. Barnes, about the double yellows. Yeah, I know that area is quite narrow, and yeah, parking can be really difficult there. Can we put double yellows in that area?
Thanks, Councillor Beattie. It's certainly something that we can look at after the fact. I wouldn't want to prejudge how people are going to park, but if an issue does arise, then yes, we can look at the provision of double yellow lines.
Thank you very much for your... Oh, another question. Apologies. Councillor Cowdy, is your question for Mr. Anderson?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, Councillor Cowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for coming along today. It was just regarding your concern about access to the Green Road being blocked by new parking, or this new parking arrangement. This is in my ward and I have visited on many occasions, and I do think when the car park that is currently there is full, sometimes that is also blocked anyway, in my remembrance, for people sort of popping their cars anywhere, if that makes sense. Would you say that's a fair summation of the current situation, or would you say that the blocking of the Green Road is likely to get worse?
I think it can't get any better if you've got to double the capacity of the shop. And on numerous occasions, I've had to actually go and ask Mr. Sturrock to move cars because basically we're trapped in, which is obviously made it worse now. He's blocked the opposite road. So, yeah, it's a big concern. And a few years ago, Mr. Sturrock actually installed bollards, and the community really did kick up, and he promptly removed them again.
Okay, thank you.
Right, for clarity, any other questions for Mr. Anderson from anyone? Right, Mr. Anderson, thank you very much for your time. That's great, thank you very much. Okay, we have Mr. Sturrock is here. The applicant, Mr. Sturrock, could you take your seat, please? I understand, Mr. Sturrock, you're really here to take questions only, is that correct?
Whichever. I can make some comments ahead.
Okay. Well, why don't you do that first, and then we'll have questions for you after that.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, the craft shop has now been in existence for 51 years on this site, which is quite an achievement in itself for any business. In that entire time, there has been no road traffic incidents around the parking or no damage to vehicles. No one's been hurt in that entire time. Now, I do accept that the shop gets very busy on occasion. You know, the shop is a significant tourist attraction into Angus and pulls folk from far and near to the premises. With regards to the green roads, have always been a topic of contention within the village, not just where we are, but throughout other areas of the village as well. The green road is exactly that. It is a green road. It is not a vehicular access to the rear of other premises and has never been that until very recently. There's been no objection and no attempt to block pedestrian access or bike access or people with horses who do regularly use that route. But it is not a through route and has never been until very recently used by neighbours to drive vehicles to newly formed entrances for vehicles onto their sites. And that is a concern. For two reasons. One, it's a grass road. It is not a vehicular route. And it has never been that. In the early days, going back to the 50s, the site was actually a dump for the village and registered as such. And was therefore, it was not a through route. The core path route was cleared by my father when he moved into the property in 1958 to make it more amenable and more pleasant. And he continued, he planted the grass, and he continued to mow that and has still mows that every year since on both the north side and the southeast side of the premises. You know, my father's very proud, as am I, of what my mother created and what it did and what it's done for the village. We employ 16 people within the premises, the majority of which, with the exception of 3, all live in the village. And that's an important thing for us as well, in that we are a hub for the village and we want to maintain that. And that's something that's key for us taking the business forward, is increasing that community connection and trying to establish more a community hub for the business, as well as increasing the commercial viability of the business, which post-COVID for many businesses has been very, very difficult, and ours has been no different to that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sturrock. And thanks for the history there as well. Okay, questions for the applicant, Mr. Sturrock. Councillor Melville first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sturrock. I appreciate the presentation that you've made for us. In terms of the car parking, have you put any thought into whether or not you might have any electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the car park, given that usage of electric vehicles is only likely to increase in the coming years?
We did speak to SSE about increasing the availability of power supply on the site. They advised that there is a limited capacity for additional vehicle charging on site. The premises currently uses an 80 kilowatt supply, and the infrastructure requirements to increase that by SSE would be quite considerable.
Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. So I'm going to ask a similar question that I asked to the other visitor. It's around access to the Green Road, and I totally understand your point about it not being originally used for vehicular access. I'm more thinking about people in wheelchairs, who I always like to think pedestrians and people in wheelchairs should be always able to go in the same places. And, you know, and just with that in mind, do you have any thoughts on how you might make sure that that access to the Green Road with the new parking arrangement is always able to be accessed by people in what I would say the largest, most complex wheelchairs?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of people with wheelchair use down the Green Road, we do have some folk with mobility scooters that use that route. And again, we've never had any issue with anyone not being able to get access through the Green Route to the core path network beyond. And we've never had anyone come to say, I can't access it with my wheelchair or my horse or my bike or on foot.
And sorry, just to follow up, you wouldn't have any issues or concerns around people in the new parking arrangement actually parking cars in a way that prevented people accessing that entrance, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, we're encouraging folk to use the car parking as it's laid out there, and with the new signage, we will be indicating the hall as the overspill car park facility. You know, and that's something we've had in place for some time, although it's not been signposted because we didn't have the planning permission to put the sign up to do that, but it is incorporated in the current application.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cowdery. Any other questions from members? Okay, for myself, actually, Mr. Stark, just you mentioned there are 16 employees in the business and all but 3 live in the village. With the size of the growth in the business, I'm thinking obviously the size of additional, because you're a tourist trap, you know, people will come to you. So, do your employees that aren't living in the village, will you? There's always danger that staff take up the car parking spaces. So I'm just thinking about, have you thought about that sort of thing from your own staff as well?
Yes, we have. 2 of the staff who live off the village actually car share, so that takes it down to 1. And the one other who lives in Montrose, they're only there 3 days a week.
Okay. And the second question I have is, again, just referring to the Green Roads. I'm not familiar, other than what I've read in the papers and things, but listening to previously to Mr. Anderson, to be honest, that road, we've clearly got new car parking spaces up the left-hand side there, and as you're saying at the moment that some people are accessing that land with vehicles to go into the rear of their properties, whatever. Is there a concern that access to these car parking spaces will be prevented if anybody chooses to park in that lane, or do people choose horizontally to park in that lane against the rear of fences of the houses?
They do at the moment because there's no defined parking base as such. Right. Part of what we want to do is sort of regularise that so that it is a defined parking area and folk know where the spaces are. As I said before, you know, we have no objection to people using the Green Road, but it is not a through route for vehicles to access properties. Previously to the northeast of this, where it joins the core path, actually it was previously ditched across it, so it couldn't be used by vehicles to go straight through.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks very much for that. There's no more questions. You're free to go. Thank you. Sorry, we've had questions. We'll move to comments from members. Councillor Melville first.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I'm having a look at this. I do think that the vast majority of the concerns have been addressed through the planning process. One of the speakers was asking, how do we ensure that public access is maintained? Well, we have a fairly strong condition in condition 2C that specifically states that the details shall include measures to ensure that public access is maintained at all times. So I'm content with that. Our roads colleagues are not concerned with any aspect of this, and with that in mind, I'm fairly satisfied by that, and I'll be supporting it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Darnell?
Just to say that if we approve this today, I'm really looking forward to visiting it because it looks really lovely on the pictures. It'll be a lot of work for you, but you've done really well so far with the new cafe, so wishing you well. Okay, thank you.
Subject to approval, Councillor Dunno. Any other comments from members? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, yeah, I think it's a well-known business. It's been there for a long time. It's well used. It's a small local business in a small town, and you know, I think with the for the reasons that are in the report, I would certainly be happy to support it, and I think it's clearly an asset to Letham and to Angus.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Any other comments? Okay, Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say that this is a huge asset to Letham, in my opinion, and I appreciate the time taken to address my concerns around access and the Green Road. And sometimes it's important to talk about these things, even though they might just be adjacent to material planning concerns, because they're very important to local people. So I appreciate the time taken. I think it looks like a really high quality development, and I will be happy to support on this basis.
Move to sum up on this one. As we've heard, this application seeks permission for the expansion of an existing business to provide what would remain a relatively small-scale specialty retail and cafe facility within a reasonably accessible rural settlement. The extension doesn't give rise to any acceptable amenity, environmental or infrastructure subject to suggested proposed conditions. Although I accept on-site parking would be limited, there is unrestricted on-street parking in the surrounding area. Our transport colleagues have said that Aldbar Road is reasonably straight, sufficiently wide, and is subject to a 20-mile-per-hour speed restriction. Consultation bodies have raised no objection to the proposal, and we've also already heard that ownership concerns are not subject for this committee. The proposal complies with development plan policy, and there are no material considerations that I believe justify refusal. So as such, I'm going to move approval, subject to the aforementioned proposed conditions in paragraph 10 of the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Melville, are there any amendments? No. Thank you. In that case, planning application number 24/00460 is hereby approved. Thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 8 today, which relates to report 43/25. I should say any members of the public who want to leave can leave at this point. This report deals with planning application number 24/00427 by identifying Stone Limited relating to the operation of buildings at Pateley Quarry in Maniki. This is an application made under section 42 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 as amended, which seeks permission to undertake development subject to different conditions than those attached to the original planning permission 17/00917 full. So in effect, the application seeks a variation to condition 2 of that permission and associated changes to other conditions to allow the cutting of stone by means of a saw within a building between 0700 hours on a Monday to 23:59 hours on a Saturday. And this time it's Ms Porter's turn to present the slides.
Thank you, Convener. And we're in afternoon now, so good afternoon, everyone. So as Convener suggested, item 8 does relate to a section 42 application relating to existing development at Pateley Quarry just outside Maniki. So as Convener gave us an overview of, members will be familiar with the process of section 42 applications. These seek to vary an existing permission, and if members wish to see that development proceed subject to the same conditions, this application should be refused. But if they're of the view the development would be acceptable subject to different conditions, they should motion to approve this application. So just having a look at where the application site's located, as you can see in the centre of the screen here, we've got the established Pateley Quarry in the surrounding countryside setting. It's to the south of Maniki, which is indicated by this grouping of buildings here, which relate to the development boundary of Maniki. And we've got the Maniki Country Park, which is illustrated by the 2 large water bodies to the northeast like I said, the quarry area in the centre here. The application specifically relates to the existing stone processing buildings, and although they're quite small on this image, you can just see these made out by the grey roofed buildings in the centre of the quarry area. So we've got the original quarry operation, which extends to the southwest of these buildings, just here, and the approved quarry extension, which is taking place to the north of those buildings. That was approved in 2020 by members. So the wider quarry is surrounded by woodland on most sides. As you can see, you've got woodland area to the north, a woodland strip to the west, and some woodland here to the south and the kind of southeast. This provides a level of screening and buffering between the site and some of the nearest dwellings and the public road. So this slide here, it shows the submitted site plan, where the application site is outlined in red, where we've got the processing buildings in the centre, and the remainder of the applicant's ownership is outlined in blue. The original permission, which this proposal seeks to amend, allows for the erection of the stone processing building on the left-hand side and an extension to the building on the right-hand side. That permission has been implemented and it is extant, and that application was approved by committee in August 2018. For clarity, the stone processing facility will remain in situ and will continue to operate irrespective of any decision made on this application today. So principally, this application seeks to vary condition 2 of that permission for the stone processing buildings, which were condition 2 restricted the operation of plant and equipment at the site to between 7 o'clock on Monday morning to 7 o'clock on Monday evening. And that was between Monday to Friday, and 7 o'clock to 1 o'clock on Saturdays. This application simply seeks to allow the cutting of stone by a saw within the existing building for an extended period beyond that time. And in this instance, it's 24 hours between 7 o'clock on Monday and 11:59 on Saturday night. So this is in order to maximise the efficiency of existing operations. And just for clarity, the 2017 application did not propose nighttime working, and it wasn't accompanied by any information to demonstrate whether or not nighttime operations would be acceptable in this location. So this slide here shows a closer aerial imagery of the existing buildings, and as you can see, the daytime saw operations take place in this building here on the left. We've got the public road just here to the right-hand side, and we've got the wooded area to the southeast in this area here. So you can also see that the works to the quarry extension have begun to take place to the northeast in this area here. So the application does not seek to materially change any physical aspects of the building or the previously approved development, and it doesn't propose any change to the amount of stone processing that's permitted at the facility under the current permission. So at the current position, the facility can process up to 8,000 tonnes per annum. This proposal doesn't seek to amend that, and it's also worthwhile noting that the proposal has been amended through the lifetime of this application to remove any proposed working on Sundays. So there's no Sunday working proposed, and working is and has not been proposed on public holidays. So that remains consistent with, that element remains consistent with the previous approval. So just in terms of the letters of representation that we've received 21 letters of representation, of which 19 are an objection to the proposal. These come from 11 households, where only one of those 11 households is located within 650 metres of the site, and that is indicated in the region of the red arrow on the bottom of the screen here. The majority of the remaining objections come from dwellings within the Maniki development boundary, and they are generally in the location of the red arrow at the top of your screen here. And the ones within the development boundary are in excess of 650 metres from the site. So the two nearest properties to the site are located in the area of the green arrow here, and it's worth noting that the two letters of support have been submitted from these properties, and those letters of support offer general support to the proposal and suggest that no noise issues have been experienced. Contrastingly, the key concerns raised in objection relate to noise impact, and we'll discuss that in greater detail in a moment. But just to cover some of the other concerns raised, as you can see from the slide here, issues have been raised around potential dust issues. However, it is noted that dust is suppressed at source by water, and a dust management condition is proposed to be reapplied to any potential approval. And in terms of light pollution, there's no external lighting proposed, and a condition is recommended to ensure that all windows and doors of the processing shed are kept closed during any nighttime saw operation. So this slide here shows again the nearest properties in the landscape context. Again, the closest properties are those indicated in the region of the green arrow, around 150 metres from the site, and they are separated from the existing saw shed by another shed, which is this larger shed here, with the saw shed in this location here. And of the 11 properties within 220 metres of the site, only one has objected. The closest objecting property is again indicated by the red arrow at the bottom of the screen here. And as you can see, it is in fact located on the opposite side of a wooded area, which separates the application property from the saw shed in question. So in terms of noise concerns raised by objectors, it is worth noting that some of the concerns raised appear to relate to noise from existing quarrying and not the proposed extended saw operation. So activities associated with the quarry extraction are out with the scope of this application, and in determining this application, members must focus consideration of any noise impacts associated with the nighttime operation of the saw. A noise impact assessment and other supplementary noise information have been compiled by a suitably qualified noise consultant and have been submitted to address potential noise emissions. Noise measurements have been taken to assess the background levels and also to assess the saw whilst operating during a nighttime period where tests were undertaken. Those noise measurements were taken from 2 locations, one in the region of the Lismore and Galloway properties, which are in the region of the red arrow, and one from the location of Denford Cottages, which are indicated by the green arrow. The Environmental Health Service has reviewed that information, and some concerns regarding noise information which was originally submitted were raised, but following the deployment of additional mitigation measures, which included blocking up of unnecessary openings on the building and extending the bund located in the area of the purple arrow just in the centre of the screen here, as well as updated noise data and further survey data and the removal of the request for Sunday working. On that basis, the environmental health officers were in a position to offer no objection to the proposal subject to appropriate planning conditions. Those conditions include to propose the noise limit condition, daytime noise limit condition, which replicates the limits set by the current permission for daytime activity, but to also include a separate and lower noise limit that's set for any nighttime operation of the saw. So the proposed nighttime limit for external amenities is comparatively low, taking into account the existing background levels, and on the basis of available information, it's considered that those levels can be met. And expert advice indicates that compliance with the external noise limits during the nighttime period should ensure that the noise levels within the residential properties, even with a window left open, would be well below the recommended standard for bedrooms during nighttime hours. So proposed conditions also seek to clarify that activities out with the confines of the building are not permitted within the extended hours. So the only activity permitted within the extended hours is the operation of the saw within the existing building. Officers from both the Planning and the Environmental Health Service have observed activities associated with operations at the site, and to summarise, the Environmental Health colleagues have confirmed that noise emissions associated with the limited activity proposed as part of this application during the extended hours should not give rise to any unacceptable impact on amenity or the environment of the area. So this slide here shows views from a path which is in the region of the nearest objector property, looking northwards towards the existing buildings, where the existing saw shed, I knew I was going to struggle with that, saw shed is indicated by the pitched roof building where the purple arrow is located, and the bund that we previously discussed, which provides a level of mitigation to noise to the properties to the south, is in the region of the blue arrow across the centre of the screen here. As you can also see from this image, the nearest properties to the south are of a much lower ground level than the existing buildings, and we're looking at about 10-15 metres lower. And indicated on the earlier slides, there's an established wooded area behind where this photo was taken that's between the site and the neighbouring garden grounds of the nearest properties to the south. So to reiterate, nighttime levels associated with the extended saw operation in this vicinity are predicted to be low externally and virtually inaudible from within the properties, even with the windows open for ventilation during that nighttime period. So in addition to the proposed noise limit conditions that were previously discussed, it's also proposed to attach conditions to ensure that any justified noise complaints are investigated, machinery at the site is operated and maintained in accordance with manufacturer recommendations, the bund on the image in front of you today is retained at its current height and extent, and reversing alarms on vehicles or mobile plant operating within the site during the daytime hours is to be either of a broadband sound or a non-audible type. So taking all of that into account, the proposal is, in the officer's view, would not result in any unacceptable impacts on residential amenity subject to the proposed conditions. So this last slide here just shows a view of the site from the public road to the east, looking in towards the site. The saw shed is the shed in the background of the image, so we've got another building in front of that, and you can just see the roof of the saw shed in the background there. There's limited visibility of the site from the wider area, and when it is seen from further afield, it will be viewed of a scale and appearance typical of modern farm buildings, which are a common element in that landscape. The nighttime operations associated with the proposal would be wholly contained within the building, and it wouldn't require any external activity. In considering impact on the road network, the proposal does not seek to increase the permitted processing output. So, as to clarify, regardless of the outcome of this application, the previous permission allows for 8,000 tonnes of stone product to be processed at the facility over any 12-month period. That was previously assessed to be acceptable, and that would remain the same as part of this application. That limit would apply, and a condition is proposed to reapply that limit. We've also clarified in the condition, well, suggested in the suggested condition, that materials should only be delivered to or dispatched from the facility between the originally approved daytime operating hours, which are 7 to 7 Monday to Friday and 7 to 1 on Saturdays. No deliveries are permitted within the proposed extended saw operating hours. Colleagues in the road service have considered the proposal in regards to impacts on the road network and have offered no objection, and there's no objection from any other technical consultees. So, to conclude, the existing operation could continue to process up to 8,000 tonnes of stone annually at the site, Monday to Friday 7 till 7, Saturday 7 till 1, irrespective of the decision on this application. This proposal essentially seeks to operate a saw within an existing building during nighttime hours for 24 hours between 7 o'clock on a Monday morning and 11:59 on a Saturday evening, with no external activity necessary. Noise data has been provided and considered by environmental health colleagues, and it's concluded the extended saw operating hours should not give rise to any significant adverse impacts on amenity of neighbouring properties, the wider community or the environment, subject to appropriate controls. And having considered all information available and the relative consultee comments, there is no reason to conclude that the development would be incompatible with development plan policies, and there are no material considerations raised which would justify refusal of this application. Therefore, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions listed in the report before members.
Okay, thanks, Ms Porter. Before we go to questions to the office, I have an apology to the committee. I was kind of omitted at the start to say I should have declared a statement of transparency here. I am acquainted with Mr and Mrs Binney, primarily with Mrs Binney as she is on the Maniki Community Council, which I attend infrequently during the year. We have not discussed any planning application, and at the Miniki Community Council I remove myself before any planning applications are considered. So I do not believe there's any conflict of interest, and I'm remaining for the remainder of this meeting. Thank you. Apologies for that. Right. Any questions for Ms Porter on this application? Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. Is there anything in place or anything getting done to do with the stone dust, which can travel on the wind and can cause respiratory problems and silicosis and can be fatal?
Yeah, so So with regard to the specifics of what's proposed as part of this application, it would be essentially to run the saw during the night time, and there is a suppression system in place at source where water is sprayed upon the saw so that the dust doesn't release into the air. Anything kind of externally would be out with the scope of this application. Notwithstanding that, there is a dust management plan condition proposed just as a precaution as part of this application, and that was applied to the original permission for the processing buildings in 2017.
Okay, Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you very much. So my query relates to the noise issue or concerns that have been raised by people. On page 158.12 or 8.12, it's highlighted that there were some concerns raised by environmental health, but these have now been mitigated by the fact of Sunday working being removed from the application. I guess if officers could explain why operation on Sundays during the day is sort of worse than operating very, very late at night, that would be helpful, because to me, they're sort of equally bad if people are being affected by noise. Thank you.
I think I would let Martin jump in on that one.
Hi there, thanks, Ms Porter. Thanks for the question, Councillor Cowdery. Yeah, this was just seen as a compromise. The lack of Sunday working is a traditional thing, a bit of a throwback, I suppose, to the old church services. The levels that are predicted and the levels which we are conditioned against are very low. It may be audible, slightly audible at times from time to time, depending on the background level during these times on a Sunday and during the evening. The logic, I suppose, with regards to very late night working and Sunday working is that people may be trying to enjoy their gardens more on a Sunday, whereas late night they'll be tucked up in their bed, whereby they benefit from the mitigation through an open window into their bedroom. So that knocks off another 10 to 15 decibels off the sound level.
Thank you very much.
I just say, Councillor Cowdery, it may be that as the applicants are here and will maybe answer questions, you can maybe ask them about that as well, particularly. Okay, that's Councillor Cowdery. Are there any other questions for the officer? Nope, I can't see any. Okay. We have the agent and applicants here. Miss Lisa Thompson is the agent, and Mr. and Mrs. Binney are here as well. If either or all would like to take their seats here, and if they wish to address committee, they can, or just take questions, whatever they wish. I take it Miss Thompson's not here then, no? She's online. Apologies. Apologies. Right. Can I just ask in that case, Miss Thompson, are you going to lead this?
I'm happy to let Brian speak in the first instance, and then I can jump in at the end.
Great. Okay, Mr. Binney, you have up to 5 minutes if you want to actually address committee, and then we can take questions after that.
Yeah, thanks. I actually don't really have much to say. We were really here just primarily to answer questions. So one of the questions raised was in and around dust suppression, which Stephanie answered. But just to expand on that, with regards to the saw shed, the operations in a saw shed for stone must be conducted with water. They have to be. Otherwise, the blades will overheat and we will wear through them a lot quicker, and the efficiency of the cut will be impacted on significantly. So there is an extensive water system in use which is controlled by pressure systems. So essentially, if the saw, for whatever reason, fails, jams, whatever, the system shuts down, and the water system shuts down with it. So in terms of silica dust, in terms of RCS, the issue that you raised on that, we are very much aware of that, and as has been touched upon, we deal with that on a daily basis. But that is primarily in what we call the dry shed. That is the guillotine shed. RCS, which is the main concern, is generated by guillotining stone. But we have an LEV system in place which fully mitigates against that, and we do regular personal dust monitoring, and we also have directional dust gauges sited on the perimeter of our operations, and thus far there has been no concerns with regards to that. And the only other thing I would add on this is just for clarity, the reason for the saws and the reason for the extension of the saw operating hours is it is a fully automated saw which allows us to run it longer. And the reason that we want to do that is because our product range has changed significantly since we first started, which is nearly 21 years ago. You would hardly think it, looking at the two of us. But the reality is that when we first started, we started selling diking stone. We then developed a business and we started selling guillotine stone. And guillotine stone is primarily used for cladding. And then when we received the consent, the approval to expand into the new quarry, we were able to invest significantly in saw production. And the great thing about that is, from Angus's perspective, that's actually what Angus sandstone was all about back in the 19th century. And Angus sandstone paving went around this area, it went around Scotland, it went down into England, and it was exported across the world. So we are reacting to increased interest in a product that this county was very famous for back in the 19th century. And to that end, we are investing in that side of the business. I will qualify that by saying, to ensure that the quarry reserve is protected properly, we are not inclined to expand on this significantly further. To do so would be to the detriment of the quarry reserve. And as a quarry operator, our first responsibility is to the stone. We must make sure that that stone is used properly. There will be a percentage of that extraction will continue to go towards paving, but the reality of it is that we are limited in terms of that quality of stone. So I can say just now that this is not going to be something that we're going to be coming back in another couple of years saying, hey, can we go again? Can we go again? That would be absolutely to the detriment of our quarry reserve, which we got 50-year consent on, and which we fully intend to ensure that we make the most out of that stone that we extract over that period of time.
Thanks, Mr. Binney. I think we've got some other two questions. Councillor Beattie.
Hi, thanks very much for coming in. The normal work. Sorry, but the nighttime level will be 30 decibels, which it's a logarithmic scale, so that's almost silent, isn't it? So how do you plan to actually make sure that that happens?
Thanks. We plan to make that happen by the mitigations that we've put in place. So when we initially did the levels, they were slightly higher, and we recognised that we could further mitigate against that by implementing mitigation around about the shed and also putting the bund in place. And we work closely with Fibrock as a noise consultant, and also environmental health, obviously. And we were able to run the saw out of hours under consent by the council, and we were able to then measure that, and we've established that those numbers are achievable.
Mm-hmm. And during the day, a lot of the time the doors are being opened shut because there's forklifts going in and out. On the nighttime operation, everything's shut down, apart from the automatic saw. So there's no, all the doors are shut. Any escape routes for noise that are there during the day aren't necessarily there during the night. And there's no personnel involved at all. Everything's completely automated, and it's set up before our sort of daytime permission times.
7 p.m.
Yeah.
Councillor Melville.
Thank you, Convener. I'm just reading in here in the applicant's case that you're currently averaging around 3,500 tonnes per annum. Should permission be granted and then you've then got the 24-hour operation, how will that affect the amount of stone that you're actually producing? What does the scale up look like, given that this is to meet demand?
Yeah, it's a good question, because in terms of, if you look back over the history of the business, when we first started in our first year, we sold 4,000 tonnes of diking stone. So to put that into context, 1 tonne of diking stone builds you 1 metre long dike, 1 metre high. Okay, so you're talking in tonnes. You're talking about a lot of tonnes to facilitate that type of production, that product. As the business has developed, we then went into cladding, which reduces the amount of tonnes required for that square metre. So we were 140s and 100s. So that meant that the tonnage sold stayed pretty constant. However, the amount of product sold in terms of square metres increased. So then we get clever and we go and develop 40 mil cladding. So the same thing happens again. We're selling more square metres and less tonnes. And then when you go to paving, because of the geological makeup of the stone, going any more than 60 mil is very challenging for us. So we're looking at 60 mil, 50 mil, 40 mil, 30 mil. So again, you're talking square metres as opposed to tonnage. So that's how the tonnage hasn't increased. But in terms of the business has increased significantly, particularly in terms of paving sales.
So that's the current picture, which I appreciate, and that's very useful context. But what I'm asking is, given that in the papers it's talking about there being significantly more demand than you can currently produce, and that is therefore why you require the 24-hour operation. You must have then modelled what a 24-hour operation would allow you to produce. So do you have a kind of rough estimate for the amount of stone that you would then be able to process on the new system, as opposed to how it's developed in recent years?
So currently we're producing about 100 square metres a week. And the reality is that as current operations, we cease operations at 7 o'clock. So that means that quite often we're not completing a cycle. So ultimately, the reality is that in the main, we will be looking to just complete that saw cycle. So in terms of additional output, you're probably looking about 20%, 30% max. And I mean, in terms of paving, I'll qualify that in terms of paving. It doesn't impact on the tonnages that we're looking at in terms of guillotine stone sales, etc.
As Brian said, that you can only set up the saw once, so it has one cycle. So nobody's coming in at sort of midnight to reload it again. So when it stops, so we're not going all through the night. We don't have people there using the flamer, the header, to complete flags. It's just preparing for the next day's production. I just wanted to add on your talk about the increased volume to relate back to the traffic question, which I can't remember where that came from. As Brian said, when we started, it was 4,000 tonnes of diking stone. They were going out in tipper lorries, bulk. Whereas now it's palletised, so it's smaller. So even though we're maybe producing more paving, we're actually not putting out more lorries than we used to do. It's going on Arctics. Yes, this is going on Arctics on pallets. Whereas years ago, when it was diking stone, it was tipper lorries going out for 4,000 tonnes, where it's much more compact now. So it's actually, we probably put out more lorries on the farm than we do, during harvest time than we do, in the quarry. So yeah, so to lead on to that, the increased paving doesn't mean increased traffic either.
As a final point, I suppose, in terms of what you were saying about the cycles, this is more for my own interest rather than anything else. Presumably then this massively increases the efficiency of the business and therefore is able to help you reduce any lead-in time for delivery and things like that.
Yeah, again, good point. And you're more than welcome to come and have a look round our setup. In terms of, lead time is a critical element, particularly when you're dealing with Angus Council for Places for Everyone in Arbroath. I thought I'd drop that in there. But the reality is that, yes, when you are tendering for a project, the way that procurement is set up now, it is critical that you can react to lead times that are being put into place. So you're absolutely right on that, yeah.
Right, before I come to Councillor Cowdy, do I have agreement of the committee to suspend Standing Order 21(5), which allows us to continue this meeting until conclusion, but because we're at that 3-hour rule? Is that okay? I think we'll be finished Yep, agreed with that. Thank you. Councillor Cowdy, we'll let you come in now with a question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just the convener suggested I put this specific point to you both, and just to sort of round this off, am I right in thinking that the reason you have removed the Sunday working from the application is to ensure that on that day you don't have anyone going in and out, as you've talked about, and creating, you know, an inevitable disruption and noise, but instead you've gone for longer hours because on those days that doesn't involve any extra opening and closing of doors, for want of a better description? Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. From the business's perspective, the efficiencies can be created far better by extending the hours during the week. Coming in on a Sunday, our son Fraser, he's kind of running the business now, so he wasn't that keen on the Sunday working anyway. And ultimately, we live in the local community, so we recognise that not operating on a Sunday, it makes a lot of sense from that perspective too.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. If there are no other questions from Mr and Mrs Binney, we'll let you away. Thank you very much. And we'll move to comments from the floor. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms Thompson, do you need to, sorry, I should have asked, do you need to add anything, or are you happy with what's been said?
I'm happy with what's been said. The only point of clarification I would make is just about the mitigation on the noise. It wasn't just the Sunday working being removed. The operator closed up any holes in the building and whatnot to improve the noise mitigation outside the site and the bund, and that was part of the process of the first environmental health response, and the second one also environmental health went to visit the site with the saw in operation, and the monitoring is based on that saw at night and not just predictions. So that's the only point of clarification to add.
Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, we're at comments, so we're going to start with Councillor Nicholl.
This is a comment, and excuse me, sitting there getting hoarse. The comment, a bit of useless information. My grandfather, who's a building contractor, the last job he did prior to retiring was he built Maniki Hall out of Denfin stone.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Comments, Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you. This seems fairly straightforward to me, given all of the effort that's been put in to mitigate the noise, and the fact that most of the objections that have come in are from much further away to the quarry than the most recent properties. I'll be supporting this. I don't see any material considerations that would cause me to think otherwise. And good luck. And I will take you up on the offer to come and see the business.
Thanks, Councillor Melville. Councillor Braze.
Yes, well, I do note Councillor Nicholl's very late statement of transparency there for the committee. But this comes down to the operation of a saw within a shed and potential noise that saw might make. Now, we're all lay people that sit in this committee, have no professional qualification in noise levels, but we do have officers who have those qualifications, and they're all perfectly satisfied with this. The applicants have taken steps to further reduce any concerns through patching up holes in sheds, etc., etc. I'm perfectly content with this application.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. If there are no more comments, okay, I think I can add. So sum up, as we've heard, this application effectively seeks to amend conditions of existing planning permission to allow internal working of an automated saw within the stone processing shed during night-time hours and on Saturdays. The proposal does not seek to alter the previously approved building, it does not propose any increase in output, and it does not propose any alteration to the working of the approved quarry. In these circumstances, the key issues are whether the proposal would give rise to unacceptable amenity, whether that be environmental and or infrastructure impacts. Information submitted with the application and assessed by the Council's Environmental Health Service indicates the proposed operation could be undertaken in a manner that would comply with noise limits appropriate for the area and which would safeguard the amenity of nearby residents. Application has attracted objections we've heard from a number of parties, and those generally raise concern regarding noise, dust and transport related matters. These have been addressed by proposed conditions, and the proposal would not alter approved output tonnage, as I've mentioned, from the facility. As such, comment regarding the quarry in comments is of no relevance to determination of this application. The proposal complies with development plan policy, and that there are no material considerations that justify a refusal. So I'm going to move approval subject to the aforementioned proposed conditions as stated in paragraph 10 of the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Melville. Are there any amendments? No. Thank you. Planning application 24/00427 full is hereby approved, subject to conditions stated. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Binney. Right, we have a couple of two agenda items which I think will be relatively short. Let you away. Agenda item 9 relates to report 44/25. This report advises committee that a proposal application, or PAN, reference 25/00012/PAN has been submitted by Murray Planning Associates on behalf of Mespil Solar Energy Limited in respect of a major development comprising of the construction operation of a solar farm with an output of up to 46 megawatts and associated infrastructure on land 250 metres south of Pit Pointy, Kirkton of Ochterhouse, and committee is invited to identify issues it would like to see addressed in the planning application that is subsequently submitted. Ms Porter, I think you're going to look at 1 or 2 slides for us, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll just go through this quickly. 2 seconds. So yeah, as convener alluded to, item 9 is proposal of application notice. This isn't an application, it's just an intimation to submit an application. So the level of detail that we have at this moment in time is fairly limited, but what's proposed is a solar farm with a maximum output of 46 megawatts on land near Kirkton of Ochterhouse. So this slide here just shows the location plan of the proposal of application notice boundary. And as you can see, it consists of 2 parcels of land, one to the south of the public road and one to the north, and that public road is a C9 classified road. The total area of the site is equal to around 66 hectares of land. And it's worth noting just at this stage that consultation activities proposed by the agent are in general accordance with legislative requirements, but it is worth highlighting that the agent has confirmed that a change of location for the 2 in-person events is proposed. It was originally proposed to be, well, the events were originally proposed to be held in the Landmark Hotel 5 metres from the site within the Dundee development boundary. However, they're now proposing a location in Angus and in proximity to the application site. They're currently exploring the ideal option of utilising the Ochterhouse Village Hall, which is nearby. And obviously, if this can be facilitated, it might result in a change in the event dates, but the new location and dates will be advertised accordingly in accordance with legislation. This image here, just last slide, just to give you an indication of the aerial imagery of the site, where the application site consists of these 3 brown fields on the south side of the public road, these 3 fields to the north, and the additional brown field just to the east side of that access to the farm here. It's a mix of prime and non-prime land. It's around about 750 metres south of Kirkton Ochterhouse and about 1 kilometre to the west of Ochterhouse. And just in the bottom of the image here, you can see Dronley Wood, which is directly to the south of the site. So the key considerations that have been identified by officers are in section 4.4 of the report, and committee is invited to identify any additional matters that they would like to see addressed in any subsequent application.
Thanks, Ms Porter. So yeah, the recommendation is really here is for members to bring up any other key issue which to be considered in any future planning application, as already stated in the paragraph 4.4 on page 211. Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I'm really pleased to hear that the applicant has decided to move the 2 in-person consultation events. This was flagged to all the local councillors by a member of the public, and we were able to raise that with the planning officers. I do hope it's able to be held in Ochterhouse Hall, because that is the most obvious place, and I don't know personally why they didn't just go there in the first place, but never mind about that. The key thing is that it's flagged well in advance to both the Community Council and to residents, I think that's going to require more proactive engagement than is required under legislation. Some developers are more keen to do that than others, but I do hope that we can stress, given the nature of the area that this development is likely to take up if it's approved, that we need to be doing more than just relying on local press and in-person events. We need to be knocking doors and things like that. But if that could be passed on, that'd be great.
Can I just add to that? The applicant is intending to do a letter drop to properties within the vicinity and to post posters in the local area too, but we can raise those comments with them.
Okay. Hi, Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, just on page 211, paragraph 4.4, where we list the considerations that that we have regard to. Could we have sort of detailed a detailed look at the species that might be affected from the adjacent Dronley wood? It's quite an important piece of woodland.
Are there any other members? Oh, sorry, Councillor Doran, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo the statements about engagement. That's really important, and I was really pleased as well that that was able to be moved to make it more accessible to people in the local community to participate in the engagement that's taking place.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Doran. I'll ask Councillor Fotheringham as well.
Thank you, convener. Yes, just to echo what my colleagues, Councillor Doran and Councillor Beattie and Councillor Melville have said, I fully support the consultation being in Octahausen, and just thank Lloyd for actually dealing with that email, because we did all get it, but he got in first. But it is very important, and at least Ms Porter's confirmed that there's going to be a letter drop and posters put out in the local community, so that's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fotheringham. Any other issues? Oh, Councillor Brace.
Yes, just to say, as others have said, that I'm pleased that they've decided to try and have this as a consultation event as close to the people most affected by it as is possible. And in this case, that would point to the Ochterhouse Hall. But on a broader note, we shouldn't be, consultations should take place as near as possible to the people, regardless of where the county line is. Because they, it might be people out with Angus who are most affected by a development, a proposed development within Angus. The other wee point, and this will be no doubt addressed when it comes to a full application, is it would have been handy to know the altitude of this proposed site. I don't think it's in the papers, but we'll get that in the full application. Thanks.
Understand that, Councillor Race. Thank you. No other issues people want to raise at the moment? Okay, thanks for that. So are the issues at 4.4 noted? Thank you. Sorry, agenda item 10 relates to report 45/25. This report on pages 213 to 227 of our papers presents the findings of the reporter appointed by Scottish ministers to determine the appeal by Industrial Solar Forfar Limited against the decision of the Council to refuse planning permission for the construction of a solar farm together with infrastructure on land at Cotton of Lowney, Kingsmuir Forfar. The reporter dismissed the appeal and refused planning permission. It's quite simply this is for noting by committee, but does anybody want to make any comment on this? Councillor Melville.
Yes, thanks, convener. Very pleased to see the Scottish reporter agreed with the finding of this committee. I think we reached the correct decision, and it's good to see that vindicated by the Scottish reporter.
Thanks, Councillor Melville. Any other comments? No, I'll agree with you completely. I'm, for one, pleased that the reporter agrees with our previous recommendation here to refuse planning permission. So all we have to do here is recommend the committee notes the outcome. Do we note the outcome of the appeal? Great, thank you everyone. It brings the meeting of development standards to an end. Thank you, it's a long meeting today, and thank you for your contributions. Have a good remainder of Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stop the live stream, please.